Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity, here to do a live discussion on Season 3 and 4 of Star Trek Enterprise. Ooh, sorry. Let me turn that off. Sorry. Alright, Season 3 and 4 of It's Been a Long Time. Anyway, joining me here for this, of course, as always, my sister Alyssa. Alyssa, thanks so much for joining.
Hi, Mark. Live long and prosper to you. The Vulcan science director told me that it was illogical for me to come on and talk to you. Although you keep singing the theme song wrong, it's been a long road, not a long time. But
I'm pretty sure it starts off. It's been a long time getting from here to there. It's been a long road, but our time is finally near.
Okay. You probably know better than I do. I always.
Too many times I listen to that damn thing. Too many times it haunts my dreams. But anyway, that first line in particular always stick with me because that's when before I'm fumbling for the remote trying to find the password, I hear it's been a long time. But anyway.
Yeah, my brain, that happened to me, but in my brain I still hear it's a long road. But
yeah, they do say that in the next verse, though, but yeah. Okay. Anyway, I think we did not sing that song enough in our first discussion, so I plan to rectify that in this discussion.
Norman is agreeing with me. He says it's been a long road getting from there to here. It's been a long time. My time is finally near. So get a long road.
What? No, I'm gonna have to stop this and listen to it right now because I was certain it's been a long time.
No, it's been a long road because a long road you're getting from there to here. The road takes you from there to here. My time is near. Norman is right.
All right, hold on.
You almost made me believe I was wrong, but I knew it's been a long road. And I appreciate you doing that, Norman. He's like, oh, I can't believe I'm doing this, but...
Oh, god damn it, you guys are right. Fuck, why did I always think it's been a long time? I was certain it was been a long time.
You did one of your videos recently, you sang that song, and I was like, he's singing it wrong, but that's okay.
It's been a long road. Yeah, a long time is the second verse. Okay, but the time is finally there.
You were so certain that you almost had me fooled. But I was like...
God damn it. Maybe I did skip it too much, and I missed it.
And then when Riker goes on lower decks, he goes, it's been a long road getting from there to here.
Well, I knew Been a Long Road was part of it, but I thought he started the song with Been a Long Time. I was certain of it, but anyway. Anyway, now that we got that solved.
This is like arguing about your body in her spotlight.
Rotor time. The Matty Jester's got it right. Rotor time, it still sucks. So, yeah.
That was a waste of a good 2 minutes.
No, we've made a very, very good determination. So now we know how the song sucks. Or now I know anyway. But anywho, yes, so there's a couple, before we jump into the bones of season 3 and 4, which are actually the good part of Enterprise. There's something I wanted to bring up because I've been watching this podcast that Connor Trenier and God, what's the guy who plays Malcolm Reed? I can't even remember his name. But the guy who plays Trip and Malcolm Reed do a podcast now. And for the first season, they were basically just talking about Enterprise and interviewing actors and people behind the scenes from Enterprise. And their second season, they started interviewing other Star Trek actors. Like they had one with Nana Visitor I thought was very interesting. They did one with Tim Russ and Andrew Robinson, and those were all interesting. But the reason I bring it up is because when they interviewed Rick Berman about Enterprise, they were defending that damn theme song. And what's his face who plays Reed was like, yeah, I'll fight anyone on that theme song. That theme song was good. I don't know why people didn't like it. But when they then interviewed David Livingston, who was a director, so he had been with Star Trek since the very first episode of Next Generation. He was like a production manager or something, but he eventually graduated and became a director, and he directed episodes from Next Gen, DS9, Voyager, and Enterprise. And I think he's probably maybe the one who's directed the most episodes in that era of Star Trek. And he's actually a really good director. I like most of the episodes he does. And I love the interview with him because he's like, I don't understand that damn theme song. Why did they come up with this? Why did they ruin this, the whole thing? And not only was he attacking the theme song, he was attacking the fact that they refused to have Star Trek in the title for the first 2 seasons, which is something I always agreed with. I know like what culture were like actually saying, oh, they shouldn't have put Star Trek in the title. No, Star Trek should have been in the title from the beginning. And he was also saying that he didn't understand why they made the show. They were essentially trying to do like Seinfeld in space. They were trying to do like your everyday life, except not funny. Like your everyday normal life in space, which is never Star Trek was about. And he was saying at the time there were shows like 24 on that were like exciting, and he was like, I don't understand why they took Star Trek in that direction. It was a totally bad move. And I'm like, the whole time I'm like, yes, I totally agree with you. And the kind of Trenier and the what's his face were being really nice about it, but they're like, oh, they were surprised by that opinion, but I was completely agreeing. But the reason why I wanted to start with this is because I feel like season 3 was actually trying to be like 24 a bit. And it seems a bit reminiscent of like 24. And then season 4, Manny Koto became the showrunner, and they kicked out sort of Brendan Braga and Rick Berman, who mainly controlled the first 2 seasons, weren't really that involved in the 4th season. And Manny Koto was a Trekkie, like a longtime Star Trek fan, and felt like he was making season 4 to be the prequel of Star Trek that I believe. And in fact, David Livingston brought up that he believed the show should have been in the first place. I think even Brennan Braga admitted that, yeah, we should have actually done it his way from the beginning. But so anyway, do you have any comments on that before we jump into that?
Well, first of all, thanks to Norman and Brandon in the chat for pointing out that it's Dominic Keating.
Dominic, yes.
Malcolm Reed. And I knew it. It was in the tip of my tongue. But yeah, and I agree with all of those points of views. And I think that season 3 being comparable to 24, which was on at the time, I think that makes a lot of sense. I never thought about that. But now that I'm thinking about it, I had always kind of thought of Lost as sort of the birth of the serialized show, but really it was 24. 24 was really the first show to really popularize the serialized format. And I was thinking of season 3 as being, when we get to season 3 shortly, one of the things I was going to say is that I think it's kind of a masterclass in Star Trek serialization that I wish other Star Trek shows would use that same model if they're going to do serialization at all. But I didn't think about the fact that it probably was modeling itself after 24 at the time, and quite successfully, I would say. But yeah, I agree with all the opinions that that director expressed there.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, let's go ahead and start with season 3 then. What were your thoughts on season 3 after your recent rewatch?
Yeah, as I said, I think it should be the model of serialization for Star Trek. Not only did it have a complete season story that was weaved throughout almost every episode. There were a couple exceptions or a couple that just only tangentially touched on it, but almost every episode related to it, at least tangentially. But not only that, but there were consequences for things. Like something happened in one episode and it still had effects in the next episode, even if it wasn't part of the ongoing story. Like this stupid episode that we're probably going to talk about in the least favorites pretty short. Had nothing to do with the overall Xindi arc, but then they still the next episode, like, oh yeah, I'm still like feeling a little groggy from that thing that happened in that last episode. Like everything has effects, and this was so satisfying for me to watch after having seen, episodes like Hard Time or The Mind's Eye, when something really traumatic happens to our characters, and then they just kind of forget about it after that. Maddie Chester, you're making a pretty good guess there. But yeah, so I think season 3 to me of Enterprise is very clearly above and beyond the best season of Enterprise, but also I would rank it somewhere in the best of all of the entire franchise. I don't know where. I have never sat down and like tried to rank all of the seasons, but it would be in the top 10 at least. Like, it's one of my favorite seasons. And it's been, well, I could trigger the song, but it's been a long time. A long time since I've actually sat down and watched the entire season all the way through. In fact, I don't know if I've ever watched it from beginning to end like that. I've watched it in chunks before. In recent years too, I've watched it in chunks, but I'm not sure if I've ever like sat and watched from beginning to end like that. And it was quite an enjoyable experience, quite the opposite of my experience watching season 2, which was really tough to get through. Season 3 was a joy. Even some of the episodes that I don't like as much, I don't know that any of them are going to make my top 10 worst or least favorite list that I'm going to be putting together here pretty soon. They're still not as bad as a lot of the season 2 and season 1 episodes. So, yeah, I think one of my favorite seasons of Star Trek.
Yeah, I mean, I was going through my favorite seasons of Star Trek again. This is still my top 10. But yeah, when I did my top 15 worst of Enterprise, they were all season 1 and 2. Like, there were no, as bad as some of these episodes are in season 3 and 4, there was none that I thought that made my top 15 worst, because there's so many bad in 1 and 2, in my opinion. But anyway, I think so. Season 3, after I went, because I watched it and I got really excited about it, and I remember like really good things about it. But more recently, when I watched it again, I kind of started to realize that the first half of the season is not that good. It's kind of mediocre. It doesn't, for me, it doesn't really kick in until the second half. And I didn't realize that, so maybe it could have benefited more from being a bit shorter. And I think that also shows that, because I believe that Rick Berman and Brennan Braga came up with the concept for the Xindi, but it wasn't until like Manny Koto came in like halfway through the season and started to sort of take control. And I think that's when the season really started getting good, and they really started formatting the Xindi format or the storyline. I feel like they didn't really know what they were doing with the Xindi at first, and it wasn't until like toward the middle of the season that they started to pick it up and run with it. But as you said, I did like the sense of continuity throughout the season. I think that was really strong, but it was especially that last sort of bit of episodes that really, like, to me, that was like serialization at its best. Like, I think it's better than just as good or as Lost or 24 and the stuff that was out at the time. And I do think, like, in some ways they did a better job than a lot of this modern Trek. Because, I mean, it kind of relied on, it had a mystery of who are the Xindi and why they're trying to destroy Earth, but it didn't feel like the big mystery, like they didn't hang the whole thing on the mystery. They kind of hanged it on like the quest of trying to save Earth instead. But I don't know what some of your thoughts on that is.
Yeah, and I definitely agreed with that. I definitely was noticing that as I was watching it, that I think Twilight is good in that first part of the season, but otherwise it's mediocre to maybe below average. But one of my favorite seasons of all time that may be close to being my number 1 season is Next Generation season 6. And that first like 10 episodes are horrible. But then what have this. I remember when that season aired, they had this stretch of kick-ass episode after kick-ass episode over and over and over every single week, and it so it becomes one of my favorite seasons of all time. I think you got to look at when you're looking at Star Trek seasons, you got to look at the fact that they have 20 plus episodes in it. So, and by today's modern standards, you look at it and say, they didn't need to have that many episodes. That's just how they did things back then. It's really hard to have an entire season that's going to be really good. Deep Space Nine season 7 is another example. Before they got into that Dominion serialized arc at the end, which should have been just the whole season, in my opinion. First, I thought was terrible. So you have a couple of episodes in that bunch that are in my Deep Space Nine least favorite list. So I think that's pretty. So all in all, I think Enterprise season 3 didn't do too badly compared to those other seasons that I still consider to be great seasons. But it did definitely, I could see that it was taking a little bit to kind of for the story to gel and for them to really figure out what they were doing with it. But once they got it going, then I think it really picked up. I thought I saw somebody in the chat said it picked up with the Saudi Prime and David. To me, when Strategem was when I started getting really interested in it, a little bit earlier in the season. So, and season 3, as you said, I'm going to be doing my 10 least favorite and then my 20 favorite episodes of Enterprise pretty soon. Season 3 will dominate my top 10. I can already tell you there will be episodes from other seasons sprinkled in there, but season 3 will dominate it because it is. There is some. I don't even know if we'll even get to all the episodes that I could generally say that I liked when we get to our favorite episodes part of this video.
So you say it's easily your favorite season of Enterprise then?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Strategem as well because I agree. That's when I think that the season really started to kick in and get interesting. Now there are still a few bad episodes after that. One of them I'm going to mention, but there were just bumps here and there. But for really, that's when the season really kicked in for me. And also in the chat earlier, someone brought up Strategem, and I believe there was another episode that Picard season 3 runner Terry Metalis was involved in writing. Oh, Impulse, the one with the Vulcan zombies. So apparently he was involved in those 2 episodes, which is, I mean, I like Strategem, but the Impulse one is kind of forgettable. It's trying too hard to be like a shaky cam modern horror thing. But anyway, so I'm still not sold on Terry Metalis because, we're only 2 episodes in Picard season 3, but we'll see. We'll see where it goes. But anywho, so let's jump into some of our favorite episodes. Let's start with the best episodes of season 3. And Alyssa, I'll let you start. What would you say is your favorite episode of season 3?
Well, I already know what yours is, so I'll save it for you. Honestly, I wouldn't put it as my number 1 favorite myself. I know what episode it is, but I think we should say that we agreed ahead of time that we were going to break up episodes that have separate titles into separate.
Yes.
We may end up sometimes using one episode to represent the trilogy. But that's how I'm going to do my top. That's how I decided I'm going to do my top 10 and top 20 is if it has the same title, like in Mirror Darkly 1 and 2, Cold Front 1 and 2, etc., then it counts as 1. If it has separate titles, we're going to count it as each individual episode, even though some of them are kind of trilogies and duologies and what have you. So with all of that said, I would definitely have to, it's kind of a tie between the first 2 of the final trilogy of this season. I think that the finale, I have a little bit of issues with the way it ended. I still love it, but it's not up there. The other 2 are definitely higher ranked for me. So it's kind of hard to pick between the 2, but I'm going to go with the Council because that is the episode that I had been waiting for. They were really building up to that for several episodes. And I love the kind of shocking ending that shows that there are stakes. Now, of course, it wasn't an Enterprise crew member that gets killed, but Dagra was a character that was
Mm.
really well developed. That's another great thing about season 3 is that they had really great characters outside of our main cast, and Dagra was one of them. And so you felt it. I felt it when he was killed
Mm.
dramatically at the end there by the reptilian. Like it was a really edge of my seat, like cliffhanger ending that I really felt. I felt it. I'm like, oh no, they killed that, because I hadn't seen this for years, so I'd kind of forgotten that. And I was like, oh no, they killed that. So, yeah, it's really hard for me to pick and choose which particular episode of the season.
Mm.
But I'm going to start with the Council, as that was an episode that the season had been building up to for a while, and I thought it had a really good payoff, even if it was just the first part of 3 parts.
All right, so before I respond to you, I wanted to respond really quick to something in the chat where Brandon Neilhouse is saying, Terry, I named a planet after myself, Metalis. I'm actually going to correct you on that. In fact, he did not. He was taking the planet that was named after him from Enterprise, and it was Brunon Brega who actually did it. But I guess he had the goal to bring it back in Picard. But anyway.
Apparently, I saw some video recently that was saying that Brendan Braga it was kind of a jab at
Yeah, it was.
Because their trip was saying how much the planet sucked or something.
Yeah.
So more like Metalis kind of all these years later kind of getting back at him. So it wasn't an egotistic thing at all.
Yeah.
Anyways.
It wasn't the sheer fucking hubris. Anyway, yeah, so the Council is easily my favorite of the ending trilogy. So I was going to use it to represent the trilogy, so now I'll pick something else. But yeah, because to me, I like the whole trilogy, as you said, and also I agree with you that I had some issues with 0 Hour, as much as I loved it. I mean, that cliffhanger ending is one, and also like Archer running down the hero shot with Archer running down the way with all the fireworks, like that was a bit cheesy, but I still like it though. Other than that, 0 Hour is still a good thing, and I like Countdown as well. But the Council is the one for me that had the most really blew my mind the most. It really was showed me, oh my god, I can't believe Enterprise could possibly be this fucking good. Like, how is this possible? After sitting through all the crap in season 1 and 2, they show me something that's like just as good as Lost or the best of 24, and the stakes, like as you said, when they killed Degra, is like that was shocking, and they kidnapped, abducted Hoshi, and the whole scene with the scenes with Archer and Hoshi going to the Council, like that was like a huge payoff, because they've been showing various scenes of the Council throughout the entire season was usually just the Xindi bitching at each other. The Council says this, and then we finally get to see Archer and Hoshi arrive. It felt like, and this is something I also wanted to bring up, and I mentioned in some of my videos before, that I feel like because the whole Xindi story arc was an allegory to 9/11, like the ending episode of season 2 was sort of an allegory to 9/11. What I love about this story arc in particular, and I think it's highlighted in this episode, is that it's not as easy as the Enterprise going in, kicking ass, and beating the bad guys. It's actually, there's a complex internal politics at play that they have to negotiate. And to me, that was a really good analogy to the war in Afghanistan. It's not like, oh, let's just go over there and kick their ass. No, there's all these intricate, politics and everything at play. And to me, nothing is more Star Trek then, rather than the good guys going up and blowing up the bad guys, they have to negotiate. There's interplays, there's personal politics, there's different interests. They have to learn their culture. They have to get in and negotiate. And to me, this is the heart of Star Trek, but they use it to tell this really intense storyline, and the serialized way in which they did it just really enhanced it.
The political intrigue, that is what really makes season 3 great, and was really highlighted here in this episode. You're right, the negotiating, the back and forth, trying to convince people, which we had seen in the previous episodes, but I think it really came to a head here. And yeah, I freaking loved it. Loved it.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that was a good episode. All right, so now I'm going to name my favorite episode of season three, which is my favorite episode of the show. It's one of my favorite episodes of the entire franchise, and that's Damage. I stand by this episode. To me, this is kind of like I always say it's like In the Pale Moonlight meets Year of Hell, but it doesn't really rip off either episode. It shows something original. Having the Enterprise that takes the aspect of Year of Hell where a hero ship is completely destroyed, but it's better than Year of Hell in some ways because the ship isn't magically fixed by the end of the episode. It remains fucked up for the rest of the season. And again, the continuity is amazing. But here it shows the crew at their lowest. They just lost 17 people. Things are at their worst, and they have to like meet this deadline that they can't possibly meet in order to save the entire human race. So that's where In the Pale Moonlight aspect of the episode comes in, where Archer has to make a decision to attack a group of like innocent bystanders. And I love this because we get so many episodes throughout TNG, Voyager, where there's these group of asshole aliens to show up and attack Voyager because they need something or something, and they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, we have no choice, we have to do it." But here, like, Enterprise are the assholes. Our heroes are the ones who are the assholes attacking an innocent group because they say they have no choice and they have to do it. And I fucking love that. And I'm still blown away by. I think this is easily the best acting in the entire show. Particularly the scene with Archer and T'Pol in the Ready Room. I always gush about that scene, just how amazing it is. That when she's yelling at him about how he can't do this, and it was like such good drama. And I've heard some reviews. I watched some reviews recently that didn't really care for this episode that much because of the subplot with T'Pol, taking drugs or whatever. I don't give a fuck. Like, it wasn't. It was, if it was a bad subplot, yeah, it could make the episode suck. But it was fine. Like, who cares about that subplot? Everything else in this episode is just so damn good. So yeah, for me, it's easily the best of the show.
Yeah, I really love this episode too. I don't quite have it as the best of the show, but I do love it a lot too. And I think that aforementioned scene between T'Pol and Archer is to me the second best debate between the first officer and captain in Star Trek, with the first being from the Scorpion. But it's a really powerful scene. And yeah, the Archer's put in this impossible situation, and he makes a really tough decision that he doesn't feel great about, but he's like kind of backed into a corner. And I really felt like, to me, and this is the BSG episode. It kind of reminds me a lot of what BSG was. There was a lot. In fact, BSG would kind of overdo it sometimes. They would overdo the moral dilemma thing a little too much in BSG. But here, it's just a one-time thing, and it was just executed perfectly. Yeah, although I don't quite have it as like the best show of the franchise or the best show of the series, I should say, it is up there for me. I definitely, looking at the IMDb rating and seeing what other people have said about it, I definitely think it's underrated. I think it deserves a lot more credit than it gets.
Well, it's funny because I was reading some of the bad reviews on IMDb because I was curious, and they were like, "Oh, this is so against Gene Roddenberry's vision. This is so against Star Trek. How could Archer do this?" And I'm like, no. I guess that some people said the same thing about In the Pale Moonlight, I think, but I think that's totally ridiculous. Like, it's great television, and it makes sense too. Like, if the entire human race is at stake. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that he would do it, and he goes out of his way to safeguard their lives and not destroy their ship too much. In fact, he puts his own ship at risk more by doing this, but he's holding those morals, and that's part of that huge argument he had with T'Pol, where he's pointing this out to her, but really he's just making excuses for the fact that he's doing something heavily immoral and trying to. And then what I love, and then we'll probably get about this later, is that they reference this later on, that this still weighs on his conscience. And again, it's that continuity that made seasons 3 and 4 of Enterprise so great.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as this Roddenberry's vision thing. I get so tired of it. Roddenberry was a relic of the 1960s. I'm sorry, we do have to move beyond his vision a little bit and maybe not abandon it completely, but maybe expand the definition of it. And maybe his utopian vision does, in order to get there, you do have to do some dirty things first. I mean, maybe you do have to get your hands a little dirty. Maybe life is a lot more complex and interesting than everybody is just perfect and happy and there's no problems. The Gene Roddenberry, I just get so sick of it. He was from the fucking 60s. Like, let's be more nuanced and interesting than that.
Yes, exactly. Well, yeah, and I believe if the Star Trek would die as a franchise if it couldn't evolve, and it can't just be stuck in that same thing. So Vinny's Aquatics in the chat says the best part of these seasons are the progression of Archer from noble explorer to battle-hardened wartime captain willing to compromise his ethics to achieve his goals. Bakula was perfect for this. I agree, and that's why that's part of the reason why I think not only like why season 3 and 4 are so much better is that they took these bland, uninteresting characters, Archer included, and made them interesting. Like they made them more dynamic, and I think in Archer in particular, how he and T'Pol has even throws back in his face in this episode like a quote from the earlier in the season, like you said this and that we wouldn't do this, and it shows just how like just beaten he's gotten throughout the season, and I love that. I think it's such great character story, especially compared to the crap they did in the first 2 seasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. All right. So what's another one of your favorite episodes of season 3?
I don't know, Mark. Should I go back into that well of the final trilogy? Should we just say they're all like just say that?
Well, I was gonna do another one from that final trilogy next. So.
Okay, then I'll just beat you to it. Then I think because it is what is next on my list, of my ranking list for season 3, and it's Countdown. And yeah, as I said, like I totally agreed with you about Zero with the ending. It's just that it didn't have an ending, and the dramatic. So it's still a good episode, but I definitely have Countdown next. If I'm not mistaken, this is the one where he confronts the Aquatics, right? Or Archer confronts the Aquatics. Was it this one?
Yeah, I believe.
Because I love that scene.
I believe so. Or was it? Oh, maybe it was at the end of the council he did. Oh God! And then because I think it was because Hoshi was abducted, or maybe they get the Aquatics to help him to get Hoshi back. Oh, I can't remember.
When he confronted them in both, and like the first one, they kind of, she poo-pooed him, and then I think he went back to them. And
it was definitely this one. Now that I'm thinking about it, is when he said he promised them that they would destroy the sphere. So that's what's led into the plot of 0 Hour.
Yeah. So the world building, and I mentioned this before, the world building of season 3 was incredible. The Xindi is a very interesting a concept for an alien race. Now, I remember when it first came on, I was like, really, how does this fit into canon? But you know what? Whatever. It fits. Like, I mean, sure, they never mentioned the Xindi in the original series or Next Generation. Whatever. Like, they have shown up, made cameos since then. They've appeared in Prodigy recently, so they were there. But that doesn't bother me anymore. The world building, I just think this idea of these 5 different kind of species all forming one species and being of these, and the Aquatics were the most interesting to me. And the fact that they were talk like whales, and they were kind of, the Switzerland. They were kind of like, get involved one way or the other. So I found that species really, really interesting. So I loved the scene when Archer confronts them. And yeah, we have the continuing drama of Hoshi being kidnapped. And so it was just real edge of the seat stuff. It was just real, like, like, oh my god, how is this gonna work out for them? Like a really exciting episode. It's just serialization at its best, as well as you had mentioned earlier. So
Mm.
um, I definitely have count. Yeah, I do have countdown ahead of it, but I really really love this one too.
Now that I think about it, the aquatics are kind of like the Ents from Lord of the Rings, where
Oh yeah,
they take a really really long time to to come to any decisions. But yeah, no, and I've heard some people recently like say that the aquatics look terrible, like the special effects look terrible or whatever. But they look fine. Like they look fine to me. Like it's early 2000s CGI. Come on, it's like I think it's fine, and I like the whole dynamic of the Zindi. What they did with it, I think, was really like interesting stuff. Having all these different species. Now, the one thing, and I don't know how you feel about this, that kind of maybe I thought might not have been done as well, is that the reptilians maybe came off a bit as like the mustache twirly villains, but I think that I don't know, like Dullum, he might just be like the evil aspiring dictator type. And I think it's not the villain. Like to me, the whole story arc isn't dependent on the villain. It's more dependent on the situation, and how they play all the different dynamics. Oh, and then there's those sphere builders from the futures that kind of look like the founders, and they live in like the prophets space.
that part I thought for a while that it was the same actress.
Oh, really?
I looked it up as a different actress who played the main female changeling, but it's not. She's so similar though.
So Brandon in the chat says the Zindi Aquatic sent the probe in the voyage home. And also Brandon says the insectoids look terrible. Yeah, I mean,
maybe by today's standards, but I mean,
yeah,
it was pretty good. I mean, like it's fine. And even by today's standard, I don't think it's terrible. I think it's just like I watch it and go, "Oh, this was made in the early 2000s."
yeah, exactly. Like I'm fine with it. I mean, but the thing is I'm so engaged in the story, and it's so well done that yeah, I think this is one is Star Trek at its best. Is would point to me of one of the best examples ever done in Star Trek of a storyline in the entire franchise. I would point to this, especially these 3 episodes. I think they were a huge triumph.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was I was going to say the council, and then I was going to say this, so you stole my. So the other one I would name as my favorite of the season would be Strategem, which we were bringing up earlier. As this is kind of like it's very similar to Ship in a Bottle, but it's actually our heroes are the ones playing the trick rather than the villain playing the trick, and I kind of like knew from the beginning that this wasn't like a future thing. It was kind of obvious, but I still loved it, and I do like how they didn't try to fool you for too long. Like they didn't wait too long to show have Archer step out of the pod and show like Hoshi and everyone standing there that they're like playing a trick on. But I think this is a very clever episode because, and this is what I'm talking about, where they're really building Archer's character, making him an interesting character, not the stupid, dumbass that he was in the first 2 seasons, where he was like, because he would come when that trick didn't work, then they tried a different trick, and then at the end of the episode, they fooled Dager into thinking they were going to Azadi Prime, and he's like, "You'll never find it," and he was just like, thanks. Like that was so awesome. It was like such a good trick, and to me, and as I said, I think this is when the storyline of the Zindi story really kicked in, and I really like this episode as well.
Yeah, in theory, based on what I've said before, you would think I wouldn't like this episode because it was kind of like a holodeck workaround. So, like, if this had been set on the 24th century, they just would have used the holodeck for this, but they didn't have it. So it was more like, practical effects, if you will. But I loved it. I did. I usually don't like when they try to like, oh, we don't have a holodeck, so we're just gonna do this other thing, like that episode in the first season that I hate where they had a holodeck all of a sudden. But I actually really loved it, and I totally agree. We talked about this before that this not as Zombie Prime, but this one is when the season started really picking up. There were a couple not so great ones that came after it, but um, this to me is when the Zenny story arc got interesting. And this is when they started making Degra an interesting character. You first hear about his kids. They're making him more of a well-rounded, multi-dimensional character, which would be built upon because, again, this season builds upon previous episodes. It has consequences. His character is built upon from here, and this is where it starts. And I found him to be a really interesting character, setting up for the heartbreak of when he's killed. Like I said, you really feel it when he's killed, and this kind of starts setting that up. And also, yeah, I agree. I love Archer's trick at the end too, as well.
Yeah. Let's see. So, Matty Jester in the chat said the insectoids look better on Discovery, although they weren't CGI, but people in suits. The insectoids were in Discovery.
Were they one of the like aliens standing in the background at that big conference thing?
Oh, right. I think I forgot. I remember that they had the reptilians were in Prodigy recently, but that was the animation.
Is that what it was, Manny? Were they at that like that conference where it was like all like different levels of people standing around in circles? Like, were they there? I don't remember.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, well, even like in Prodigy times, apparently the insectoids are like friendly with the Federation, which is pretty. That's what Daniels predicted, so it's good to see that. But anyway, what's another one of your favorite episodes of the season?
So I'm going to go with one that someone in the chat mentioned earlier as being, I think it was Norman, mentioned as being overrated. And I do think it's a little overrated because it's number one on IMDb, and it's not that. But it is one that when I watched it a few years, I'm talking about Twilight, obviously. I'm talking about Twilight. I watched this a few years ago where we did a top 25 like time travel episodes, I think, for Star Trek. With me on, it was actually I remember when it was. It was 2020. It was the last live stream I did before I transitioned as acting Tomko. And when I watched it, then I think that was the first time I'd seen it in a while, and I was like, eh. But then I watched it again because I was considering it for my top 10 time travel. Actually, it fell into my alternate timeline top 10. And I grew a lot more respect for it. And then when I watched it in context of season 3, I liked it even more. I was actually a bit surprised that it came that early because I was in my head, I was thinking it was a little bit later in the timeline, but it actually is really the first good episode of the season, if we're being honest. And I do have some issues with it. I think Trip is the most idiotic captain in Starfleet history. I mean, his decision at the end makes no sense at all. But I do love that they were showing this connection between T'Pol and Archer without there being romance necessarily. I mean, they were kind of hinting at it, but this is way in the future in an alternate timeline. Maybe she had developed romantic feelings, but it didn't come outright and say that. It was more about her guilt, and I love the connection between these two characters when it's done well. So that aspect of it, I really did enjoy, and it's a pretty good alternate timeline type of story, and it's very unique. I love the resolution that those parasites or whatever are like. When you eliminate them, you eliminate them all. They're like exist outside of time. I thought that's a very clever concept. So I thought it was a pretty clever episode overall. So it is a little overrated. It's not the number one Enterprise episode, and it's not even my number one in season 3. But it's a pretty good episode. I've come to appreciate it a little more the last couple times I've watched it.
Yeah, I think my opinion of this episode's actually gone down a bit. I still like it. I still think it's a good episode, but I've watched some reviews recently from several YouTubers who trashed this episode, like totally hated it, and maybe that affected me. But I still like it. I still think it's good, but the more I look at it, it does seem like kind of the by the numbers yesterday's Enterprise type storyline. But I mean, they throw in some original aspects, as you said, like with the parasite set, and they have like the Memento storyline in there where Captain Archer doesn't remember anything, has no short term memory, which is a really interesting way to go about it. But I suppose it is that ending where Trip acts like a fucking moron and they kind of just by the numbers. Oh, let's kill the parasites and that will save the timeline. This never happens. Uh, so but the interesting aspects of it, the original aspects of it, is what I gravitate towards, and why I still would give it like an 8 out of 10. Like I still think it's a great episode, but I just wouldn't give it like a 10 out of 10 like I think I used to. But yeah, I still think it is definitely one of the better episodes of the season.
Yeah.
But maybe overrated less. Although, yeah.
As Norman clarified, it's a bit over. Like I said, it's a bit overrated. Yeah, I would say so. It's not one of the greatest in the series, but I've gone the other way. I think I was bothered more by trips. At the end, it's definitely contrived, because to create tension that it really makes absolutely no sense for him to do what he did and go, no, I'm sorry, I can't. We're under attack. And like, you're gonna die. So why don't you just take like? Did you hear what they said? Like, this works. None of this will ever happen. And whereas you're making the decision is 100% leading to your death. Like, you're a moron. So I think they bothered me more. And then I think upon subsequent viewings, I think I went the other way where I was like kind of more able to look past that and really focus on really interesting and unique aspects of this episode. So I like it, yeah.
All right. So for my third pick for really good episode of the season, so I think I'll come up with it. I had several I was thinking of, but I think I'm going to say, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this correctly, similitude is usually how I pronounce it, but I've heard other pronunciations.
I've always heard similitude, but
similitude, yeah.
From you, but I've always heard similitude.
So. And I guess the reason why I like this, because I remember when the episode first came out, this was voted like the third best episode of Enterprise. I'm like, this episode's not that good. But I've come to appreciate it a lot more in recent years, and the main reason is comparing it to Tuvix and realizing that this is actually a good version of Tuvix. Like, this is what they should have done with Tuvix, and I always point that out to people who are like... I've heard other people recently say Tuvix is the best episode of season 2 of Voyager and one of the best episodes of Voyager. So many people have been saying this. And I'm like, have you not seen Similitude? Because it's like, Tuvix is so terrible and does everything wrong. And its moral dilemma that it's trying to say makes zero sense. Whereas Similitude does everything right. Like, its moral dilemma totally makes sense because... Sim is a different person than Trip, and he's definitely killing him off, and he stays in character. Like, he tries to leave the ship to save himself, but he can't bring himself to do it because he can't betray Enterprise like that, other than the fucking Tuvix who's a narcissist. He doesn't act like Tuvok and Neelix at all, but Sim actually does act like Trip, and so they actually pull this more of the... And they make it really, like... powerful. Like, it's really emotional, the ending where he does actually sacrifice himself and you actually feel for him even though he was just a clone that was only alive for 5 days. Like, and that's actually an accomplishment. So it's probably the main reason why I like this episode.
Yeah, it would have been next on my list too. I wrote down I wrote down like 7 or 8 episodes just to have my... But I tried to write down 6 so that if you said 3 different ones, I would still have 3. But yeah, this was next on my list. And the other difference between Sim and Tuvix is that Sim is a sympathetic character. Like, you generally like him.
Yes.
You like him as a person, whereas Tuvix was an obnoxious narcissist who's really annoying, did not give a fuck about anybody else. Janeway is like, oh, what about Cass? Yeah, Cass will be fine. Yeah. Sam is a likable character, and you really feel for him. So when they do have to kill him, it is emotional. You really actually feel something. Whereas the feelings that they were trying to get you to feel in Tuvix was so manufactured.
Yes.
So yeah, I think I'm on the same boat. I think that this episode is elevated because it kind of washes that bad taste in your mouth from Tuvix, washes it away. So it's like, it's definitely, I don't know if I would like it as much if Tuvix didn't exist.
Yeah, I know.
It's just such a good contrast.
Yeah.
It's such a good contrast. This is that concept done correctly. So yeah, and it's very emotional, and I really, really, really enjoyed this episode when I watched it in my rewatch.
But to be fair, I think I would still like this if it wasn't for Tuvix. Maybe I just like it a bit more because it does present an interesting more dilemma. Because Archer is essentially, this Sim could actually live a full life, and he's essentially killing him off in order to, solve their mission. And it's another thing that he will regret later on. So yeah. It's actually referenced again, unlike that Tuvix thing, but that shouldn't be referenced because that was bullshit. But anyway, so I think if I don't know if you're ready to move on to our worst episodes, or I don't know.
Yeah, let's move on to the worst.
Okay.
Let's get a little negative from season 3 a little bit.
Yeah, so I will start this time with my least favorite episode of season 3, and I believe it's pronounced Rajin, I believe. The episode earlier in the season where they had a hot chick come on board the ship who apparently was like an agent for the Zindi, and she was like flirting with everyone, and and didn't she have like this like sexy scene with T'Pol as well? I feel like this is the sexual gratuity that I hated in the first 2 seasons of Enterprise, like at the forefront, and it was a really big blemish for this season. And more than that, it's just a boring episode, and it's just doesn't really offer anything new about. Oh, look at these hot chicks, aren't they sexy? It's the whole like Rick Berman or producers or whatever that were just trying to push the sexualized element of the show to get more ratings, and I just think it sucks. Yeah.
First of all, I think Brandon, you might be thinking of a different episode. You might be thinking of one in season 4 that I'm going to talk about.
Yeah.
But you know what? I didn't have this on my list mostly because I forgot about it because it's kind of a forgettable episode. That's kind of my take on it. I don't know if there were other episodes that bothered me more sitting through it, but now that you talk about it, yeah, that is episode did talk. But yeah, I don't know. I can't even picture what the woman looks like. It's just such a forgettable episode to me. Like it just didn't stand out in my mind at all. So that's probably why I didn't have it on my list. But yeah, it sucked. I agree with you.
And I did want to point out Matty Jester in the chat fixed the episode Tuvix, saying a great ending would have been if Voyager unfreeze Sim's torpedo coffin and he phasered Tuvix. There we go. That's a good ending. So anyway, so what would you say is your least favorite episode of season 3?
So my least favorite episode of season 3 is one that I like to call the Beauty and the Beast episode, which is Exile. And there's a lot of things that really bug me about this episode versus the over-the-top, like Beauty and the Beast or like Dracula imagery, like the castle with the candles and the fireplace and the 17. Like it's so over the top. And it was just so obvious that this guy was going to want Hoshi to stay there. It is the world's most That's the dumbest thing. This is where this is one of the episodes where I think Captain Archer is a terrible captain because he left Hoshi there for a fucking week with this obvious creep who obviously wants her. And he does say, "Well, I don't trust him. If you don't trust him, then why the fuck are you leaving him?" I find it. I know you're desperate for the Cindy, but that's not a good excuse. Like, no. So yeah, I think it's the cheesy over the top castle imagery that really puts us over the top. That's why I call the Beauty and the Beast episode because it's so cheesy, but it drives me crazy how obvious it was that no, you don't leave Hoshi there. So I hated this episode. It was drove me off the wall watching it.
I actually didn't hate this one that much. I definitely think it's a bad episode. I think it's one of the bad ones of season 2. But I think what I liked about it is they actually developed Hoshi's character more, and I liked her reaction to this guy, and then focusing on it. But everything you said there, I totally agree with. Like, it was dumb of Archer just leaving there. It was so obvious that he was going to try to trick them into keeping her there. I'm like, duh. So this one didn't stick out to me as much as the terrible one, but yeah, I definitely didn't like it.
I mean, sure, they had some character development for her, but it was all contrived because none of that should have happened. Like the reason why Archer left her there is so the episode could happen. Like, it just made no sense.
Sure.
For him to do that.
I did want to address Norman Buckwald in the chat, said listing some of his least favorite episodes: Impulse, North Star, Carpenter Street, and Doctor's Orders and Children of Time, which were 2 copies of other previous episodes. Actually, yeah, and I did my top 10 Star Trek episodes that rip off other Star Trek episodes. I mentioned the E Squared, but I forgot to mention Doctor's Orders. I'm like, oh, how could I forget that one? But actually, Carpenter Street was one of the episodes I was going to name for my best. For me, it was between that and Similitude. I loved Carpenter Street. I know not a lot of people liked it, but I did. But anyway.
I thought Carpenter Street was fine. It's more in the middle for me. What's Doctor's Orders? Which one is that?
That's the one where they go through a nebula and Phlox is the only one who's awake because...
it's one. One.
Yes, yeah. One from Voyager, but with Phlox instead of 709.
Well, I didn't have a problem with that one. It was fun. I didn't think it was one of the greatest, but it was fun.
All right. So another one of what I have next for my... Oh, God, yes. Next for my least favorite of the season was Hatchery. This episode was... All right, this episode bothered me on so many levels. The whole thing with, like, Archer, like, getting infected with these things and trying to save the insectoid babies. Okay, that's fine. That's one thing. But then, like, the... Mako's like completely side with Archer, and it's been a while since I've seen the episode, but I didn't buy that at all. Like, it didn't make any sense because Archer like wants to delay on their mission, and the rest of the senior officers wanted to get back to saving Earth and stopping the Xindi. You would think the Makos would be 1,000% on board with that, and that they wouldn't. And the fact that they're loyal to the captain, but they're not idiots. Like, they can clearly see that he's incapacitated and he's acting all crazy. I gotta save the little babies, and that they would. And that's what I said. It's like, this is an insult to anyone who served in the military, saying a military people are automatically morons. They're not. Like, they can clearly see that he's So this episode, I don't. It's just it was a waste of time too, and there was reference later on because they used like a shuttle to go somewhere or something. But I could have really done this episode. Actively aggravated me.
I did not have this as my list of least favorites. It's fine to me. I guess I have a lower opinion of military meatheads than you do. In character, I felt like that's the whole. Not that everyone in the military behaves that way, but you've seen a few good men. You've seen, and I've watched the news, the just following orders. excuse for things that is a common, not saying everyone in the military thinks that way, but is a very common mindset. Oh, I'm going to unquestionably follow orders. That's how military people are trained. So I 1,000,000% bought it because I think that's very realistic. Not that everyone in the military does that.
Well,
But
despite,
a way
but
for
it's not.
training.
But it's not just that I think they're being obtuse, but it's also the fact that they want to kill the Zindi and Archer's stopping them from doing that. That's another thing why I wouldn't think they would follow him.
Yeah, well, but again, like it's the unquestionably following orders thing that I really bought. So I didn't. I will say I didn't like the whole way. I'm gonna take the babies there. I thought that was a little silly. So it wasn't. I didn't love this episode either. But I actually didn't have it in my list of least favorite. I think I had 4 down here and it didn't make it in there.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it's not a. I can. Yeah, it's not a great episode either.
All right. So, what was another one of your least favorite episodes of the season?
So here's one we've referenced a couple times: Extinction. So more at the beginning of the season where they did kind of, they were still trying to find their way, and it was definitely, a sidestep from the Zindi arc. I mean, I think that it tangentially might have been mentioned, but didn't really directly relate to it, and it was just a complete rip-off of Identity Crisis. I actually was reading a review on IMDb today where somebody was comparing it to Threshold, but no, this is much more like Identity Crisis.
Yeah,
I thought, and then also, wait, there's another episode where people are. Isn't there one where people are driven to go home, and a whole separate episode? I'm thinking of Identity Crisis because that's the one where Jordy and the old lieutenant friend of his gradually get transformed into another species, and that's how the species procreates. So that is kind of a
and they're driven to go home to that planet.
Yeah, they are. I thought there was even another episode out there somewhere where somebody's driven to go.
I can't think of that.
But anyways, because I remember when I was watching it, I thought it was a ripoff of Identity Crisis and something else, but now I can't remember what the something else is. Not Threshold. I didn't think of Threshold at all. But and it was just because I've already seen Identity Crisis. It just felt like, as you said about that other episode, a waste of time. Like, I want to know more about the Zindi. We're here at the very beginning of the season. We're setting up the Zindi. Let's get into that. Why are we taking this side step for this pointless story that I've already seen before? I just found it boring. I just had no interest in this episode at all.
I didn't like this episode, but I don't think it's like I've heard other people listed as like the worst of the entire show. Which, as I said, I don't think is as bad as a lot of stuff in seasons 1 and 2. But it is definitely one of the worst in season 3. I'll certainly agree with that. Interesting thing, you mentioned Identity Crisis and Threshold. The thing that those 3 episodes all have in common, they're all written by Brennan Braga. He seems to have this obsession with body transformation thing. And he's later apologized for this episode and said it didn't work. And I believe LeVar Burton directed this episode.
I noticed that. I was like, LeVar Burton, wouldn't you be like, hey, I already did this episode. Like, what's episode already.
But he's talked in interviews about how he was embarrassed by this episode, that he thought it was absolutely terrible and regretted directing it. And I think the actors involved also talked about how terrible it was. But so it's definitely, I mean, for me, it wasn't the worst thing in the world. Like, I think there's much worse in Enterprise, especially in the first 2 seasons. But
we're talking about season 3 here.
Yeah.
Season 1 and 2. Yeah. I don't know that this makes my top 10 worst.
Yeah. But I'm saying a lot of other people would say this would be top 3 worst of the entire show, which, I'm not getting that far, but it was definitely not good.
Yeah, no, I don't think I have anything. I doubt I'll have anything from season 3 in my top 10 worst list.
All right. So another one I'll mention as one of my least favorites of season 3 is Harbinger. Now, Harbinger is the episode where they first introduce the sphere builders and they meet that one dude who's in the tube who's dying. Now that aspect of the episode was fine, but that actually wasn't the main thrust of the episode. The main thrust was as Enterprise turns. It was a fucking soap opera with Reed and the Mako guy like fighting each other and having like the dick measuring contest and just like, and it was like, oh, you're improving, and like the whole shit, and it was all about like the Makos trying to train the senior officers to be more buff, and then it started with the, ended up with Reed and what's his face, what the hell is that Mako guy's name? I can't remember. Major something, I don't know, but it ends up with them like beating the shit out of each other, and Archer dresses them down. And I believe this was also the episode that had the stupid like thing with the, I hate this one ongoing storyline in season 3 I wasn't a fan of, was the Vulcan like neuropressure therapy that T'Pol was doing for Trip. To me, that was an obvious like, let's get these two to hook up. And in this episode is when she was being all jealous because Trip was performing another Mako woman and thought that was getting jealous of her, and it was just a fucking soap opera. Oh, Major Hayes, Brandon points out, that was his name, Major Hayes, and I just thought this was a dumb soap opera, and I was not interested in this at all.
Yeah, I also didn't think to put this on my list of least favorite either, but I don't love it. Like, it's definitely, yeah, I mean, those two guys basically having a dick measuring contest was not really, not must see TV for me. I kind of honestly was sort of against the whole idea of the Makos like having this military force. It did make sense for them to take them along, but then they stay in season 4, and then in These Are the Voyages is 10 years later, they're still there. So I don't know. But I was never a huge fan of the Makos to begin with. So yeah, but I will say this, they did build up to this. I mean, Reed from the very beginning had bad feelings about the Makos and was feeling threatened by them. So at least it wasn't out of nowhere. Maybe that's why I didn't put it in my least favorite list. But yeah, I don't love it either.
Well, yeah, but with me, it's like I saw that storyline coming. I'm like, please don't, like, just don't go there. I'm not interested in this. But I do like how they resolve Reed and Hayes's like feelings for each other towards the end of the season, where Hayes dies, and that was cool. But that was the end of the season. This episode, I thought you didn't need. I don't think you needed this.
Well, one could argue this set up for that. So,
I don't think. I think you could have done it with that. But anyway. What was their next least favorite of the season?
So the next one I have is Chosen Realm, and this it just really engaged in two tired tropes that I just find really uninteresting, and one of which I find actively annoying. One of the tropes is the aliens take over the ship, and now we have to get the ship back, and let's do Die Hard type thing, and we're being held captive on our own ship. I'm kind of bored with that trope. It's not interesting to me. And then the fact that there's these really stupid religious zealots, and I'm sorry, but the religion is dumb, and the religious zealot trope, which is really irritating to me too. So it had two tropes I don't like. So just by default, I'm gonna have to say I don't like this episode. I also just found it really, really boring and uninteresting, and I just wanted to get past this and get back to the good stuff.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of this episode either. I mentioned in the Star Trek episodes that rip off other Star Trek episodes video I did that this kind of is ripping off Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, especially that ending when they go to their home planet and it's all destroyed and hate killed everyone. I'm like, I think I've seen that one before. But the thing about this episode that makes me wonder why the fuck that they did it is this is a very obvious analogy to Al Qaeda. But the whole season is like an analogy to 9/11. So why do you need to have this micro episode that does it, but more bluntly and more sort of clumsily, like it doesn't handle it very well. Whereas I said I thought season 3 overall handled the allegory like extremely well, but this was just like hitting you over the head. Religious extremism is bad. I'm like, we don't need that. Like, yeah, it was just a waste of time.
Yeah, that's still a good way to sum up this episode. Just a complete waste of time.
All right. Well, was there any final thoughts on season 3 before we move on to season 4?
Oh no, I was thinking you had one more, but that's right, you started it. So
I did.
we are done. Yeah, no, I think I'm ready to move on to season 4.
Yeah, I think there were like a couple episodes Norman mentioned, like North Star, which I was in Doctor's Orders, which I also didn't like. I think those would be my next picks. Like North Star being the Western. That was another like complete waste of time. That was the episode that felt most unlike season 3. Like it felt like it fit more in like season 2.
Yeah, I will say I ended up liking North Star more than I thought I would when I first saw the concept. But at the end of the day, it's still this stupid thing where Star Trek has to have a Western. That was actually going to be next if I were to get another.
Oh, were you? Yeah. All right. Well, let's go ahead and move over to season 4 next. Now, what I thought was interesting when you did your announcement video for this live stream, you mentioned that you maybe didn't like season 4 as much as a lot of other people did, or maybe it wasn't as good as season 3. Because
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think if you look up the word average in the dictionary, it's season 4. Like I think season 4 is just the definition of an average season. There is nothing in here that I find to be particularly great. One of the greatest things that Star Trek has ever done. There will be things that make my top 20. There will probably be a couple ones that slip into the back end of my top 10. But nothing that is truly great. When I look at Star Trek franchise as a whole, there's nothing that I see that's truly great. And at the same time, there's very little that I see as really, really bad. And there's actually one episode that we'll get to, and it isn't These Are the Voyages. We're going to do a separate discussion about These Are the Voyages, by the way, because it doesn't make either of our categories. It's kind of an anomaly, but there is one season 4 episode that isn't These Are the Voyages that has a good shot of making my top 10 worst episode list, and we'll get to it. But other than that one exception, I think there's nothing particularly bad in this season. There's nothing particularly amazing. I feel like there's a lot of mediocrity to me. But the interesting thing about season 4, you mentioned earlier how they were saying that this was a true prequel to the original series. And my observation in watching this season is that nearly every episode, Cold Front parts 1 and 2 was holdover from season 3, and then maybe there's one or two others that I'm forgetting, but almost every single episode is connecting the dots to the original series. Almost every episode is going, that thing from the original series, like this is how it all started, kind of thing. And I think that with mixed results, I think sometimes they do a really excellent job at that. I think sometimes they really enhance the story of the original series and the overall story of Star Trek as a whole, and enhance the Star Trek universe, make it richer, make it better, make those stories better, and give them more meat and enhance them. And other times we get episodes where we neither wanted nor needed that explanation. So like when they get into a little bit of frequelitis. But
yes.
But I don't think any of those are particularly like horrible episodes or anything like that. I will have a couple of them on my least favorite list, but I won't have them probably in my 10. They won't be in my 10 least favorite of the show. So I don't think anything is particularly horrible. And I think we'll get to it when we get to some of the favorites. Some of the other people's favorites, I'm like, so I guess I don't think as highly of some of the episodes as others do. Not that I think they're bad, but I just don't. There's no truly great episode of Star Trek in this season, so that's why it's kind of in the middle. But on the bright side, it is light years better than seasons 1 and 2 combined. So it is still way better. But to me, season 3 up here, season 4 is somewhere down here. It's a huge difference. I think season 4 is more average in the middle.
Yeah, it's interesting because most opinions like the majority of people I heard agree that season 3 and 4 are better than seasons 1 and 2. There's the occasional weirdo out there. Like I saw this one video where they're like, "Oh, season 3, you forget about that. It's total shit. But watch seasons 1, 2, and 4." I'm like, anyway, but most sane people agree that the seasons 3 and 4 are easily the best. But the opinion I've been hearing more often is that season 4 is the better season. Like most people pinpoint season 4 as the best season of Enterprise, and season 3 as the not as bad as the first 2 seasons. Um, which is interesting because I also agree that season 3 is clearly the best. I clearly better than season 3. I think maybe I like. It sounds like I like season 4 more than you because for me it's a bit more than average. Like there's a lot that I really like. There is a lot of fanboying in here, and a lot of it I think the majority of it I think really works. There's one in particular that it aggravates me, which I'm sure we'll get to. But for the most part, I think you can tell that Manny Koto has a love for Star Trek and it feels like a prequel to the original series, which I appreciate because the first 2 seasons it's like didn't feel like Star Trek to me. It didn't feel like a prequel, and it felt like, why are we going to go back to do a prequel if we're just going to do this bullshit that doesn't even feel like Star Trek, or at least did. And I will say, like, because I don't know if you're going to bring up Homefront or not. I wasn't planning to, but I will say it is interesting that they decided to tie up the temporal Cold War, and just at least they didn't like totally ignore it. At least they tried to like resolve it. But I would have wanted something more. Than just because they never reveal who the fuck Future Guy is, and that still pisses me off.
Cold Front? Isn't it called Cold Front? Wait, let me look at my notes here.
Oh, what did I say?
You said Homefront.
Oh no, I meant Cold Front. Homefront is the one from Deep Space Nine. You're right. Cold Front is the one I'm thinking of. Yeah, because the Cold War. Oh no, it's called Stormfront.
It's called Stormfront?
Yeah, Cold Front was one from season 1. Was the season 1 episode? That was one of those stupid silly
Wait a minute. Yeah, Stormfront. You're right. It's Stormfront.
But anyway, yeah, I'm getting all these fronts mixed up. But yeah, I mean, but if they reveal that Archer, maybe it's better that they didn't reveal who Future Guy was, because if it was Future Archer, then I would have fucking hated that.
Yeah. I do love that they did attempt to do all these episodes that were connecting the dots to the original series. I think if there were a season 5, I would want them to pull back on that a little bit, and maybe not make every episode be that, which is kind of what they did in season 4. But I think it worked more often than it didn't work. The other thing about season 4 I wanted to mention is now watching it so recently after having watched the Clone Wars, the format really reminded me of the Clone Wars because they did a lot of like trilogies and duologies. In fact, most of the season was structured that way. There's a couple of stray episodes here and there, but a lot of it is a 2-parter or a 3-parter. A lot of 3-parters in it. So it kind of reminded me of the Clone Wars in that way.
That's a good point. Apparently, and I know both of us never watched it, Doctor Who apparently was like that too. But so I hear. But anyway, Matty Jester completely solved the temporal Cold War, saying Future Guy was Mark all along. What a twist! There we go. That's a good ending. I was Future Guy. Why the hell did I want? But anyway, Future Guy was Riker. There we
go. Norman says season 5 should have been a Romulan War serialization. Yeah, I mean, that would have been. I know that they said that they had the war with the Romulans without ever having seen them, but that was made in the 60s. Like, I think it would have been hard to pull off a war against a species that you don't get to see. I think they did it well in the episodes that they did do it, but for a whole season, I think that would have been.
I think they could have retconned it. I would have been okay with retconning that because. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. You never get to see them. And they said they fought it it was before they had view screen technology. They always have view screen technology, so
Yeah,
just ignore that. I would say, and just
yeah.
retcon it. But yeah, apparently there was the plan to do a Romulan War storyline in season 5. They also plan to do a sequel to Cloud Miners, or prequel, I should say, where they visit the episode that Stratos City from the episode
Mm.
Cloud Miners, which that would have been interesting. But another storyline, which I'm glad they didn't do, is they're going to do a prequel to the Borg Queen and have what's her face play a Starfleet officer engineer who's assimilated by the Borg. I'm like, thank God, I don't need an
Yeah,
origin
I
story.
have heard all of these. Yeah. I'm actually not a fan of the Cloud Miners prequel either because I feel like, well, I mean, I don't know how they would do that. Like, I feel like it starts there. Like, I don't know, but maybe they would have pulled it off.
All right, so let's go ahead and start with our favorite episodes of season 4. I shall start this time with the episode Kirshara, which is a part of the Vulcan trilogy that they did. And I was talking before with Alyssa that if I'm gonna use this episode to represent all 3 episodes. Otherwise, all 3 episodes would take up all 3 of my slots for my favorite because I love this trilogy. Now, I think the final episode to me was my favorite because it just has this like fantastic fantasy like type feel to it. And maybe it's a bit of a tropey here, but it still works for me. Where they have this artifact that it's going to bring peace to the world, and Archer has the memories of this, Sirach in his head, so he's acting, knows all the visions and then having visions and everything. I just all that worked for me, but. And also, I like how one of my biggest issues with season 1 and 2, which I've been extremely vocal about, is how the Vulcans are dickheads. And I hated that portrayal. And I like how this fixes that. Now, some people mention it retcons it. It doesn't retcon it because it comes up with an in-universe reason, which I buy, which I actually think really works on why. Okay, they were dickheads before this because there was the central command was corrupt, and that's why. And there's a revolt here, and they're out of power, and that's why they're the Vulcans we know and love from the original series and later on. And so that makes sense. And also, I like the reference to T'Pau. I recently did my review of Amok Time, who they show her a younger version of her. For me, that makes me appreciate Amok Time more, her appearance in it as well. And I just, in this episode in particular, what I talked about before, and apparently I'm the only one in the world who sees this, so I could be wrong, but I feel like this is a huge analogy to the Iraq War, which because the evil Vulcan guy, whatever, is saying the Andorians have weapons of mass destruction, which they clearly do not have, and is just using that as an excuse to start a war for other purposes. He's being controlled by other interests, kind of like the oil and the corporations, but in this case, it's the Romulans. So for me, I saw it as a huge analogy, and I love it. And I actually love that this came out in 2005, where the Iraq War was supremely popular, and I love that they were able to slip in this anti-Iraq War sentiment into this episode. But apparently, maybe I'm just making it up because I haven't seen anyone else ever comment on it. But the weapons of mass destruction thing, to me, that was like really obvious. And like Shran in this episode and the whole Andorian conflict, and that coming to a head with Archer bringing the artifact, it's like an epic episode. It's one of my favorites of the show.
Yeah, I can definitely see that Iraq War analogy for sure. So this trilogy overall, to me, is a bit overrated. I don't love it as much as other people. However, this particular episode that you named will be the one that cracks my top 20 for sure. I think it was my favorite of the 3. I think it was a good ending. I do like that they kind of brought the Vulcans back around to how they turn into in TOS. I do feel like, though, as compared to other episodes in season 4, this is not only setting up for TOS, but it is fixing a mistake they never should have made to begin with. Like, they never should have made the Vulcans be that way. And that leads to my ultimate issue with this trilogy as a whole that I can't look past. Now, everything you said about this episode, I agree with. So just say that. This is my favorite of the trilogy. You will probably see it in my top 20 somewhere. Maybe it even cracks my top 10. I did really like this episode. But the trilogy as a whole, I feel I could not get past the villain. I could buy a corrupt Vulcan government maybe if they are corrupt but still logical. And this was like the so obvious least logical Vulcan, and then like he's not even pretending to be logical. He's just like, let's kill them all. That's logical to kill everyone. And it's just so over the top, and I can't get past it. So this is why I just cannot name this trilogy as my favorite of the show. Is in there with the kind of slightly above mediocre stuff. There, all the great stuff in it. I cannot get past the fact that this Vulcan was so ridiculously illogical. It wasn't even trying to be logical. It was such an evil mustache trolley villain, and they do make up for it by revealing he's a Romulan at the end, or maybe he was working with them.
Working for them, I believe. Yeah.
I thought that they were saying he was a Romulan.
Oh, really? I didn't get that. Maybe I missed
Which
that.
would make sense. I'm like, of course he's a fucking like he's not even remotely logical. So I just can't get past that. It just bothers me too much. I can't get past it. That's it. I still like this episode. I still have it on my list. This particular one, especially, I still have it on my list. But again, it's a trilogy that shouldn't have been necessary to do because it was kind of correcting a mistake, but it was necessary. It was necessary to correct those mistakes. They should have never made those mistakes in the first place, but they did. So it was good that they went back and like, no, see the whole Vulcans being assholes thing that was that ends here, and Vulcans go in a direction that leads them more toward the way they are when we get to TOS. So I did appreciate that. I just. And the fact that all the other Vulcans in the council, like, they did argue with him, but they still followed his orders. Like, why would they not just oust him immediately? Like, sorry, you talk about the Makos following Captain Archer's orders. This is a million times worse. Like, why were they following this guy's orders? He's so obviously not even remotely logical. Like, why did they go along with him? And the little arguments that they put up, it doesn't cut it. They should have kicked him out of there. And what really bugs me, not only should they have kicked him out of there, how the fuck did he rise to power in the first place? Like, he's not even a little bit logical. He's not even teeny tiny bit. So that's my hang up with these episodes that I can't ever get past.
Well, see, that doesn't bother me as much. I feel like the Central Command organization as a whole was corrupt, not just one dude. He was just a representation of it that we saw in the episodes. And I also personally I think of him as Vulcan Dick Cheney, and so for that everything else
Vulcan Dick Cheney, no, they're logical. Like, there shouldn't be one.
Yeah, I suppose. I don't know. I love all the sort of references to beyond this, all the Vulcan references they make throughout the trilogy. It's cool.
I don't get me wrong. I like all the things other people like. I just can't get past it.
Yeah.
I still like them. I just can't call them great. They're just not
that
great.
one. Yeah, it's just never bothered me as much. But it's the same actor who plays Admiral Layton, so it's a very similar character.
Yeah. I've seen him in other things.
Yeah.
He always plays bad guys.
And Norman Buckwell in the chat says, well, it's always the Vulcan who's evil. Remember Field of Fire and Gambit for two classic examples. Yeah, those weren't good episodes either. Well, Gambit's okay.
Which one was Field of Fire?
This is a DS9 one where there was, Esri was hunting this serial killer on DS9. It turned out to be a Vulcan. That was so dumb. I hated that.
Gambit? Wasn't that actually a Romulan? I thought that was
No, she was acting like she was a Romulan, but turned out she was a Vulcan. Like, that was a big surprise at the end.
Okay, I thought it was the other way around. Okay.
Yeah. Wasn't that played by the person who plays Savick and Star Trek 3? Yeah. Anyway, digressing here. All right, so So what would be your pick for a best episode of season 4?
So I have a feeling I'm kind of on an island on this. I don't actually know how other people feel about this. I didn't look on IMDb or anything this, but I'm pretty sure I'm probably the only one who's going to say that this certain trilogy I liked better than the Vulcan trilogy, and that's the Andorian one. So I'm going to go with Babel 1 as my representation of it. I kind of liked all three of them. So in this one, the Romulans are mustache twirly villains, like the Vulcan is, but they're supposed to be mustache twirly, so that's fine. I have no problem with them being mustache twirly. I have a problem with the Vulcan being mustache twirly. But also, this episode establishes really important TOS lore without having to fix a problem that was caused in season 1 and 2. So it's another reason why I like it better than the Vulcan one. And Shran, I just love Jeffrey Combs, and I love Shran, and I do. And Journey to Babel. So I know I probably have it ranked higher than you, Mark. I've always liked Journey to Babel, and to kind of call back to that and bring the Tellurites in, and the Tellurites, do kind of bother me in that another one of those one-note species where this entire species has one characteristic, but that's just Star Trek. But yeah, I really like the political intrigue. It was obvious that it wasn't really the Tellurites who attacked the ship, but I don't think that mattered. I was still intrigued and who was really behind it, what was really going on. And most of all, I just like the setup of the Federation. This is the first time they were like, hey, we're out here exploring. Hey, maybe we need to form alliances. And so I just really love that concept. And that's when, the wheels start turning in Archer's head, and I guess that's more in the next episode in United, where that is a thing that's happening. So I just picked Babel 1 because randomly, I guess, because I kind of do like I like the first two a lot. The Anar I do also like, especially since it introduces a species that we see in Stranger New Worlds. But I think that one does feel a little tacked on. So I think Babel 1 and United are probably my two favorite. And I Jeffrey Combs is Shran. So I'm probably on an island just putting this very high, but I do like these episodes.
I don't think you're on an island. I think there's a lot of people. I've heard a lot of praise for these episodes. I think maybe most people would prefer the Vulcan trilogy. I don't know, but I've heard a lot of praise for this trilogy as well. I like it too. I think these two episodes. I wouldn't pick. They didn't make my list for favorites of season 4, but I still think they're good episodes. Like they're strong episodes. I think maybe the ANR is my least favorite. Like of the three. And I come to appreciate it a bit more. Before I used to think of it as a bad episode, but I watched it recently. I was like, yeah, it's not a bad episode, but it felt kind of anticlimactic a bit, like the story should have ended with United, but I don't know. I like the use of the Romulans. They have that actor who already looked like Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's appeared in a lot of. He played like a Klingon in TNG and one of those like red faced dudes in DS9 that Quark went to the Gamma Quadrant to meet. But anyway, he was interesting as Ramen, and they actually had remans in that episode, I believe. So they're referencing Nemesis because this came out after Nemesis. I think it's, but yeah, and the whole thing with the Shran and the fights with the Tellurites, like that was all good. So yeah. I think it's maybe not my favorite, but definitely a strong episode.
Yeah. And I was actually just looking. So I had written down of all the episodes of season 4 that I liked, and then I ranked them, and I was reading off of the original list. Now I'm just realizing this actually wasn't my number 1. So there's something else I had ranked higher, but I'll get to that later.
Oh, okay.
I'm just realizing. I was like, oh, this was actually my number 2. But
okay. And you mentioned Journey to Babel. I'm actually about to watch that for my reviews, and yeah, I wasn't as big of a fan as most people of that episode, but it's another one I think is okay. All right, so I'll name another one of my favorites of season 4. For me, it's the Observer Effect. Absolutely. I thought this episode was really chilling, and I love how they actually use the actors And it's funny because this was like I've read a lot of behind the scenes about this is how this was a huge like money saver because the entire episode takes place on the ship and they don't have any guest actors because they just get our main cast members to play the guest characters, which is actually an interesting way to do it. But I think this actually works really well because I recently watched Aaron to Mercy again. And this works really well as a prequel to that episode, to the Organians. And I think it helps explain some of the logical inconsistencies in Aaron to Mercy, because if they're like at the end of Aaron to Mercy, they're like, "Oh, we don't like interacting with you humanoids. We find it disgusting." I'm like, "Then why do you have a fucking planet with buildings and you go around in humanoid forms? Like, why do you do that?" But then this episode kind of explains that they want to have more sort of interactions, and it's kind of looking at the Prime Directive from the opposite end, which I think is an interesting way to do it. And I just love the sort of debates that they have. And it's kind of a cliche the way, Archer sort of gives them a guilt trip speech at the end that gets them to change their mind. But I still like it. But I think most of all, it was a really dark and chilling episode. Like the sense of foreboding of like helplessness of this is a situation possibly could not get out of, I think really worked as a chilling episode, and it worked as a sort of just dialogue based like ship bound episode that I find these type of things really impressive. So I really like this one.
I had it on my list as well. I did really like this one too. For the same reasons. I think it was really foreboding, really chilling, and like how are they going to get out of this? And just it was just chilling the way that they didn't reveal them to be the Organians right away, right? They did. Did they reveal that later or everything?
I don't think so. I don't remember.
I feel like you just thought they were. At first, I was just like, oh, they already did this type of thing with that. What episode was that? Like, there was some other episode where they had some non-corporeal beings.
Oh, those energy beings that were like taking over the ship. Yeah.
Yeah. So at first, I was like, didn't they already do this? But then I think the fact that it was the Organians kind of fixed that for me. But even before that, I was just much more engaged in the plot. I was much more on the edge of my seat than I was in that other one, whatever the one was called. Was that in season 2, I guess. But anyways, like, so I soon found myself into this episode. And then once they revealed it was the Organians, I was a little uncertain, like, because I haven't watched Aaron to Mercy in a while, how much it did line up to it. But then I watched your review for Aaron to Mercy, and I was like, okay, I'll buy what you're selling now. I have to go and watch Aaron to Mercy again myself to see it. But I was not that I thought it didn't connect. I was just like unsure because it's been a little while. But that's good to hear that you think it matched up well. Because I do overall, I come out of this thinking it is one of those episodes that I mentioned at the top where they're connecting the dots to the original series and doing a good job of it. So I really like this one too.
Cool. Let's see. All right. So, what is another? Well, I guess it would be your first pick for best episode of season 4.
Yeah, no, while I don't think these are all great episodes of Star Trek, I have one particular issue with it, but I still love these episodes. I still have a place in my heart for The Mirror Darkly Parts 1 and 2, because I've just always had a place in my heart for the Mirror Universe, and I love the concept that they would just do a bottle two-parter that does not involve any of our Prime Universe characters, and it's just showing us a look into the mirror darkly, like just a look into the mirror. And this is another one that connects to the original series because of the Defiant from the episode The Napoleon Web shows up here, and I thought that really worked well. I remember when I first saw it, I was like, they might be stretching it a little bit, but now I actually love it. Now I think it as well. It is definitely fan servicey that they have to put on the uniforms. There's no reason for them to put on the uniforms. That's pure fan service, but it doesn't bother me. And they throw in the Gorn, which at the time we thought was really good technology. Now people make fun of that technology of the Gorn, but I would rather this Gorn than the Gorn and Strange.
Oh yeah, the college mascot.
Well, not the college mascots. I'm talking about the Strange New Worlds.
Oh, the Strange New Worlds, the aliens, the xenomorph.
Yeah, it's college mascot goes without saying. Yeah. And they worked the Tholians in, and all of it worked. I actually think my one kind of issue with it is that I don't think Scott Bakula does a very good bad guy, especially in the second part where he starts, seeing a vision of his other self. And I don't know, I wasn't a huge fan of that. I didn't always buy him as a villain. God, what was it? There was one particular line. He said, "We're conquerors," and I'm like, I don't buy it. I don't know. So I didn't quite buy Scott Bakula's performance as a villain. But I don't know. I just love this episode so much. I love the concept, and I remember you might mention this, Mark, because I remember that we used to. I used to be really bothered by the ending with Hoshi and saying she's Empress Hoshi, and I'm not bothered by that at all anymore. I actually really like that. It's very consistent with the Mirror Universe, where everybody is backstabbing people, and nobody would have suspected Hoshi of doing that. Yeah, and like Brandon says, love the Mirror Universe theme music. This is the only episodes in my rewatch where I could actually sit through. So I appreciate it for that as well. Not that I think the theme that they use is amazing, but it fits the Mirror Universe, and it is not. It's been a long road getting here. So, yeah.
I still wish they would have referenced Empress Hoshi in the Discovery. I was disappointed that they did reference Defiant, though. Used that as a plot point. So my facetious answer of what my favorite episode of Enterprise is this episode, because it's the only one that doesn't even feature the freaking theme song. Like that automatically makes it the best episode of Enterprise because I don't have to sit through the long road bullshit. And I remember actually being so blown away by this because this is so original. Like, this is totally fanboying out, hard out. And I feel like for most of the Star Trek series, particularly Next Gen and Voyager, they were not allowed to do this. And I think because this is like sort of Rick Berman and all of them were being pushed away, and I think they might have known that the show was getting canceled at this point. They were just like, fuck it. Let's just go full out fanboy and just fanboy out and do all this, crazy shit. And I thought it was a lot of fun. Now, that being said, I don't think I'd pick this as one of my favorites of the season. It's actually starting to drop down because it is a bit silly. And I think it's I still have fun with it. I love that it's silly, but I can't really say it's like one of the best of the show. Still might make my top 20, but not my top 10. Yeah, and I agree with you about Archer. The one thing that bothered me about the episode is how they made Forrest the captain. Archer was just this mutinying first officer. I don't know why, but it felt like I don't know. Mirror Archer is like pathetic, and maybe that's the point. But that kind of bothered me. I don't know. I thought it might have been more interesting if he wasn't. But like, I love that they brought the Gorn in. I love that they brought the Tholians. God damn, it was so cool seeing the Tholians. I want them to bring the Tholians back so badly. So yeah, it was a fun just fanboying out watching this episode. But that's yeah.
Yeah, still all out on the fan service, and it worked. Like, it was just like we're going all in on the fan service, and I even like the opening where they did the Zephyr Cochrane.
Oh yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, that was a really cool opening. I remember when I first saw it, I was like, "What?"
And it was risky for them. This is the first Mirror Universe episode where there's no crossover. It's
Yeah.
just simply this is the origin of the mirror universe, and I did appreciate they were taking that risk as well. And it's not just we didn't have to sit through; it's been a long road. It's the fact that that was actually a good intro, and I love how it was like the inverse of instead of showing all these great exploration moments, they showed like Nazis marching and shit, and showed how this evil empire was building. I had mentioned this in my review where I think this is the universe where Edith Keeler didn't die and the Nazis took over or whatever, and
Mm.
that's what's led to the
But
mirror
they
universe.
they said in some episodes somewhere that it might have been a book, which is not canon. I don't know. I remember hearing somewhere that it was the eugenic wars is where things.
Oh, okay, maybe I didn't hear that either.
It's totally possible it wasn't a novel and not canon. So I'm
Yeah.
actually not 100% sure if that's canon, but I do remember that being said somewhere. Um,
So Matty Jester says something I really would be cool if it was true that in the mirror universe, the writer of the Enterprise theme song got put in the pain booth. What in the agony booth? Oh God. Anyway, all right. So I guess it's my pick, my turn for best episode of season 4. I want to pick the episode Home. I think this was a really good character story, a really good follow up to season 3 story arc. I love that they didn't just try to do a TNG Voyager, just, oh, it's a new day. Let's just pretend like whatever happened now. Like everything had consequences. And this is what made sense for Archer's character. And this is why I love how what they did with Archer's character showed the weight of all the trauma that he went through in season 3 and how that he was suffering from PTSD essentially in this episode and how that affected him and how he was like, well, I don't even deserve to be in Starfleet. Well, we should just put a fucking Mako everywhere, and how he was like really like overcome with grief. And he mentioned like the stuff from Damage and the stuff from Similitude in this episode, and they also showed the natural effects of the xenophobia that would have on Earth with the guys like attacking Phlox just because he's an alien, like getting to that bar fight, like all that stuff. I think was really cool, and it's good to have this. Like, I actually went as far to say in my review for this that I think this is better than. It's very similar to the episode Family, but I actually like it better than Family because to me it's more sort of round reaching. But I know that's a controversial statement. But no. Anyway, I love this episode for that.
Ding, 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 ding. You hit on the biggest disagreement we have. This is number 2 on my least favorite list.
What?
I'm going to name this on my. When I watched this, because I remember when we did our season 2 review, I listed Horizon as a family ripoff, and I was like, oh, this is even a bigger family ripoff. This is just directly ripping off Family, and I just don't buy the trauma with Archer. The way that, like, I guess Scott Bakula isn't as good of an actor as Patrick Stewart, but I just didn't buy that he was feeling trauma, and I just feel like we never got any hint of it. Like, this is different from Best in Both Worlds, which was a 2-episode arc. This was a whole season arc, and we never got any hint of it. It just seemed out of nowhere, and then it kind of ends after this, and he's back to normal in the next episode. I was also really bothered by Saval's sudden turn at the beginning of the episode. Saval, right? He's the Vulcan
Yeah, ambassador guy. Yeah.
popular guy. At the beginning of the episode, he's his usual dickish self, like "fuck you, Archer, you suck," and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he's on his side. And I do like that they made that turn. I wish it was a little more earned. I mean, definitely from this point on, he is that way, and it comes in handy for the Vulcan trilogy that comes a little bit later. And I'm glad that they had him make that turn because he should have, but I just felt like it was completely unearned and just completely out of the blue, where all of a sudden he's like, Archer, I'm your friend now. Like, what? And I did not like this episode. I thought it was just a blatant ripoff of Family and didn't do it anywhere near as good. And maybe because I just didn't buy Scott Bakula's performance here. I don't know. I'm a big fan of Quantum Leap, and I always love Enterprise. But when it comes to him having to do like real acting the way that Patrick Stewart He's just not good. Like, I'm sorry, I couldn't buy it, and I just can't buy the drama. So this is like a pure ripoff of Family.
I think that's unfair to compare Scott Bakula to Patrick Stewart. No,
I can't help but they're doing the same episode. They're putting Scott Bakula in the same exact position as Patrick Stewart, so you have to compare it. You have no choice. The episode forces you to compare them.
I don't know. Scott Bakula could, of course, never be as good as an actor as Patrick Stewart. Like, that's a given. But I bought it. Like, I liked it, and I stand by that. I think this is better than Family because I thought Family was a little bit boring with him just and his brother being a total dickhead. I thought was a bit contrived. Whereas this, I totally bought his interactions with the Captain What's-Her-Face. And I think they needed this episode. They needed, just like they needed to have Family to follow up the Best of Both Worlds, they needed to have this episode to follow up the season 3 story arc.
I think I needed an episode like this, but not this. Like, it just, all they did was just copy and paste Family, and it wasn't as good. So,
all right, well, we shall have to agree to disagree on this.
You have knocked off one of the ones that I had for it was my number 2 least favorite.
God, I can't believe it. I'm shocked. I'm shocked.
I can't believe you liked it. It's a
marvelous. I think it's easily one of the best. Yeah. I guess you didn't watch my review for this because I gave it like a 10 out of 10, and so
no, I never saw the review for it.
Okay. Well, anyway. Okay. So interesting.
It is not the episode that makes this is going to make my top 10 least favorite, though, or has a chance to make me. It's not as bad as.
I think we will agree on that episode because I think I know what you're going to bring up. But anyway, so wow, first big disagreement of the stream. So what would be your next pick for best episode of season?
I actually have run out of them. I had In the Mirror Darkly, I had Babel 1, I had United, I had Kirshara, and I could talk about United, but I always kind of talked about it with Babel 1, and then I had Kirshara, and I'm looking at my greater list, and I don't really have anything else. So I'm done. If you have another one, you can go ahead and throw it out there.
I guess my other one would have been In the Mirror Darkly. So, yeah. I mean, there's I guess we agree that the whole augments thing was like middling.
It makes my least favorite as well.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll get to that soon then. All right. So, well, let's start with the least favorites then. I guess. Let's start with you. What was your least favorite of season 4?
So this is the one that does have a shot to crack my top 10 with the season 1 and season 2 episodes as least favorite. I don't know if it'll make it yet. I have to sit down. I plan on doing that video by next week. So I have to sit down and figure out what my 10 worst or 10 least favorite episodes is. So I don't know if this will make it or not, but it is in the running and has a definite chance, and that is Bound. This episode is one we did not need. They're playing off of the lore of the Orion sex slave thing that was started that was kind of, it comes from the original series. This is one that they're trying to connect the dots to the original series. Later Trek shows would ignore this and focus on the pirate episode or the pirate aspect, which I believe, did they do the pirate thing in the animated series when they were calling them the Orions?
Yeah, the Orions, yeah.
So they modern Trek completely ignores the Ryan female sex slave thing, or barely mentions it. I think for the most part ignore it. And really, when Tendi is complaining about being stereotyped, she's not complaining about being stereotyped as a sex slave or a, as they say at the end of this episode, the women are really the masters. But
they actually referenced that aspect of this episode in Lower Decks, where Tendi met that Orion dude in DS9. He's like, "Whoa, don't control me with your."
It's a joke, yeah.
Yeah.
The focus was for the Orions. The focus was the pirate aspect of it. As well they should. Like that, and the same thing when they brought them into season 3, and you can say what you want about Osira and what a bad villain she is. They did focus more on the pirate aspect than I'm talking about Discovery, pirate aspect than the sex slave. As well they should, because this is awful. Like in modern Trek, we've gotten smarter and we've gotten more, aware of what the actual feminist movement is about, and not. See, this makes this just the classic mistake that male writers, men, tend to make. This idea of feminism, that feminism means women dominating men, women controlling men, women using their sexual prowess to control men. Whereas, in fact, that just degrades women. This whole episode just degrades women, and it's not about. Oh, that was such a cringe line. It's like, oh, it's supposed to be a big twist, you know. It's really the men who are the slaves. That is not what feminism is actually about. Feminism, just like any movement, just like the pro-trans movement, pro-LGBTQ movement, is what it's about is we just want to be seen as normal fucking human beings. Like, that's it. We don't need to control you. As a trans person, I'm not trying to control all the cis people. That is not what this is about. This is like one of those faux feminist episodes where they think it's feminist, but it actually is equally as degrading to women as anything else. So this episode bothers me, and I just take joy in the fact that Modern Drag does, for the most part, maybe they make a little joke on Lower Decks, but for the most part, kind of brushes this aside, as it should be, because this is based off of something from the original series from the 60s. They shouldn't be playing off of some of the antiquated tropes from the 1960s. Yeah. So I hate this episode with a passion, and I don't know, because there are a lot of bad season 1 and season 2 episodes, so it's not a lock to be my 10 least favorite, but it's definitely in the running because I really don't like it.
You know, this almost, when I mentioned that I didn't have any season 3 or 4 episodes in my top 15 worst. This is the episode that almost cracked it. I think it would have been my number 16. I think I slightly edged it out just so I could say there were no season 3 or 4 episodes in my top 15 worst. But yeah, this is definitely the worst of those 2 seasons. I also had this as my least favorite of season 4. It's similar to everything I said about Regine, but worse. And just like the whole, like, I went back and reviewed The Cage recently, and the whole aspect of like Pike considering like owning Orion slaves, like that did not age well. Like, that makes me feel very uncomfortable watching that. It's like, why the fuck would he do this? And the fact that they bring it back, but they try to justify it. No, it's really the women who are controlling the men. As you said, it's not any better. It doesn't make it any better. And it's such a stupid twist to begin. I remember when I first watched this episode and they revealed it, I'm like, that's so fucking stupid. I remember saying that to myself. Like, the whole concept of, and it's another way so they can have all these sexy women running around the ship and sexualize the show as the aspect of Enterprise that I fucking hate, and that it's still present in season 4. You know what is interesting though? I haven't watched that many episodes of this fan-made Star Trek show that was made before Discovery, before CBS shut it down, called Star Trek Continues. I watched a couple of them. It's actually, it surprised me how good it was. They had some of the classic writers who actually wrote for the original series come back, and they did this one episode about Orion slaves, and they actually did a really good job. Like, they showed just how terrible slavery was and how the whole concept of having slaves was awful. And I was like, this is way better than fucking Bound and what they actually did in Enterprise, like denouncing the whole thing. And I'm like, ugh. Yeah, so yeah, totally agree. This episode is absolutely garbage.
I feel like by the time we get to, it was 2004, I think they should have known better. Like, I think they should be making an episode like condemning slavery in general. It's not better if men are the slaves. Like, slavery is awful, no matter who the slaves are. And yeah, the over sexualization. Also, I forget to say it because I get focused on the sexist aspect of this episode, but I also am just always annoyed by the whole any kind of mind control episode where the crew is acting differently.
Oh yes, God.
Time where anyone in the crew is being controlled. Yeah, there was that god awful one we talked about in season 2 where they all were like obsessed on a thing. Like all any episode like that, I just when the character is acting out a character and being controlled, that alone makes it a bad episode. And you put on all this sex slave stuff on top of it, and it makes it the worst episode of the season by far.
Easily. Okay, so well, that was also my least favorite episode of the season, but I guess I'll get to my second least favorite, which was Daedalus. And the main thing about this episode is it was just boring. It's like it felt like a season 1-2 throwback because
What episode is that?
so it's the one where the inventor of the transporter came on board and he was looking for his son. He was stuck in the transporter. It's like a plot we've seen like a billion times before. This monster turns out to be my son, trying to get him back in the. It's like what fucking what's that guy Dutrell did in Voyager, and it's like and it's I felt like there was no reason for it. It felt like this. Why is this episode existing? It's just boring. I'm not interested in this character. I'm not interested in this plight. They're just recycling tropes that they use in Star Trek. So it felt like a season 1 or 2 callback to me. It's felt like they're falling back to the boring crap that they used to do. So yeah, I never liked this episode.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I didn't love it either. I just kind of more dismissed it as filler in between trilogies. Like they had the Vulcan trilogy, they had the Augment trilogy, and then they had this, and then they had I don't remember if they jumped right into I think
They
they
did
had Effect.
Observer Effect, yeah, which is actually a good episode.
It's a good episode. I just felt, yeah, this seemed like the first filler in between the trilogies, and like I kind of just like dismissed it as that it was filler, and just hand waved it away. As I guess I was like, yeah, this is. I mean, I kind of expect this episode now, kind of thing. So, but I agree with you. Like I just didn't put it on my least favorite list because of that. But I definitely like, yeah, it's tropey, it's pointless, and not a very interesting episode.
All right, so what would be your next pick?
So the next one I'm going to go with is Borderland, which is part 1 of the Augment trilogy. And the Augment trilogy overall, the concept of it was fine. I think my big issue with it is that it was stretched out into 3 episodes. I think should have been 2 max. I could buy it as a 2-parter. Maybe I think you could have really done this as one self-contained episode if you really wanted to. I just felt like they're doing it because Brent Spiner. Oh, look, it's Brent Spiner. Look at it. And also, there were a lot of throwbacks to Wrath of Khan. The way that the Augments all dressed the same as the '80s, like Wrath of Khan people, like it was a little ridiculous. Like, I guess that's how Augments dress. They all have like these hairband look. So it was definitely like trying to invoke. I felt manipulated, like they were trying to invoke Wrath of Khan at the same time as going, "Oh, look at this!" As Brent Spiner playing a Soong. Now this episode was made before they overdid the Soong ancestors, but I can't help now watching it after seeing Picard season 2, even though I know it's came first that Soong ancestor thing was a little overdone. I think this episode would have been fine as a 1 or 2-parter. And the reason why I chose Borderland to put on the list is particular because I think this is the one that could most easily just been completely X'd out of there, because this is the side plot where they do, again, the Orion sex slave trade, which I hate and I thought was totally unnecessary and didn't fit in to the other 2 episodes. So even if you say the other 2, the whole concept of it is just kind of mediocre. This episode I have on my least favorite list because I just don't think it needed to exist. Like I just think you could have kind of started with episode 2, and I honestly think there's a way you could have done this whole thing in 1 episode, but 2 at the most. So that's kind of why I put this one on there.
Yeah, I don't know. As I mentioned, I thought the Augment trilogy was kind of middling for me. Like I used to really like it, but as years pass by, I'm like, actually, it's not that good. There are aspects to it. I think it was from this episode when I like I actually feel like they at least show that the augments are superior. Like that's one of my criticisms of Spacey, what I reviewed recently. Or felt like we were told repeatedly that Khan was superior, but not shown it. Where here, I thought we were actually shown it. Like I do like the scene. Well, I think it was this episode where Malik went to Archer's like, "I'm going to attack you." And then like beat the shit out of him. It's like even with the warning, you're helpless against me. Like I thought that was cool, but I do agree that it was stretched out for too long, particularly the whole subplot with the Orion slave trade. Like that was just like fan service in a bad way. That was just unnecessary. It didn't really add anything to it. It's just like, ooh, look, here are the Orions, and but I did like the next episode in this trilogy, Cold Station 12. I think I did put in like my top 30 or whatever. Like I really liked that episode, but this one was kind of yeah. It was
I guess I'm just not that interested in the augments in general. Like, that's like kind of why I would prefer to just be in one episode. Just get your, standard like fan servicey. Oh, everyone loves Khan, and we're gonna even make them look the same as Khan's people, and we're gonna fan service you. I guess it's just not the fan service I wanted. Like, I don't care about the augments. Wrath of Khan's a great film, but also all I needed are the augments. Just that one movie. Like I don't need any follow up, and I don't really like that they have to have a soon ancestor being the one who is trying to bring the augment.
yeah.
That was just. And again, fan service I didn't need. And it's not in this particular episode that I'm talking about, but the third episode they do that thing that they do with like that they did at the end of what the hell, the Borg episode starts with an R.
Regeneration.
Regeneration. They did that kind of thing where like they kind of imply that he's going to shift his focus to androids.
Oh God, yeah. I was gonna bring that up. That was the dumbest thing ever. It was like, you know what? I shouldn't study genetics. What about cybernetics? Oh my God.
And even though it's still several generations before
Yeah.
data. Yeah. So I don't love that it was just an excuse to get Brett Spiner on the show, honestly. Like I don't love that they were
See, it didn't bother me as much like the whole Brent Spiner, except for that one line. That was the one thing. I was like, all right, that was dumb. But here it's like, oh, they're just having an excuse to bring Brent Spiner back. It annoyed me more when they did it yet again in Picard season 2. Like that annoyed me a hell of a lot more. But yeah. All right, so I guess it's my turn to name a least favorite episode. The next one I'll say is Affliction, which I don't think by itself is that terrible of an episode. Like it's more of a middling episode. Like it's the second part, or actually no, I'm talking about Divergence, not Affliction.
Okay.
Divergence, the second part. Because this is when they made that stupid revelation, but like, which is the main reason why I hate the episode. So the episode itself is fine, I guess. It's like it's Phlox being captured by the Klingons, and they had this side plot with Reed being in Section 31, which seemed like out of nowhere, but fine, whatever. But then like they revealed, oh, the augment DNA being mixed in the Klingons is why they had smooth foreheads. I'm like, bullshit. Like, first of all, it's just a makeup change. We don't need an in-universe fucking bullshit to explain. It's a makeup change. It was made in the 60s before they had the technology and the money to do the makeup. In later years, they had the technology to do the makeup, so they did. There doesn't need to be an in-universe bullshit. This is one of the ones that pissed me off the most. It's like in fucking Discovery Season 2 where Pike's like, rip the view screens off the ship. Like, no! There's no in-universe reasons for this bullshit. And this one actively aggravates me in how some like nerds would try to go out there like, oh, see, this is the reason why. And explain to me this: why the fuck did Core have a smooth head in the original series and look like a normal Klingon and DS9? And why did every Klingon have a smooth head in the original series and no Klingons had a smooth head in later seasons? Like, this dumb. It makes no sense. Just don't try to do it. It irritates the fuck out of me. But anyway.
100%. It was actually next on my list. I'm actually out of. I mean, we could talk about another one of them in this trilogy because it kind of represents the whole trilogy. And
it's a two-parter.
Or two. Sorry, two.
Yeah.
The two-parter. Right. felt like a trilogy. It went on for 2 years. Um, but yeah, I 100% agree. This represents the worst in this prequel. The prequel is
Yes.
we're just trying to connect the dots where no dots needed to be connected. Like I did not need an answer for this. And you forgot about also in Discovery how they tried to give an in-universe explanation for the makeup change in the Klingons.
Oh God, yeah,
But this is worse than that. This is
yeah.
And it doesn't even explain it because you're right. All of the Klingons, this makes it out like only some of them are this way. But in the TOS, all of them. And why do they like have pale skin and look completely like humans in season 2 of TOS? So actually that whole thing is problematic.
And yeah, why do they behave like Ferengis in the second in TOS season 2 and not like Klingons? But anyway,
yeah. Although that whole thing with the brown skin in TOS is problematic because it's basically white people is the norm. But I digress. But so that's another reason why they shouldn't have poked that bear. Like they shouldn't, because the Klingons. Now, to be fair to them, they always said that they did picture the Klingons as they look in the films. They just didn't have the budget for it or the makeup for it. That's fine. But you look at it just on an island, it's just like, well, they kind of just are brown people. So it's just kind of, it's a little weird. But anyway, so that's just something you don't need to touch on. Like, we don't need to be reminded of that. And as Brandon points out in the chat, the Klingons.
The Klingons, yeah.
The Klingons.
No, like the way they handled it in DS9 Trials and Tribulation was perfect. When they were confronted with those Klingons, and Worf's just like, we do not talk about it with the outsiders. Like, that's a joke. That's all you need to say is just pass it on, just not talk about it. Actually coming up with a bullshit excuse for it is the dumbest thing ever.
Yeah.
And this two-parter also had the subplot with Trip like leaving the Enterprise and going on the other ship, Columbia. This whole storyline felt like a waste of time. Like it felt like if they were gonna do this, keep him on Columbia. Like that might have been interesting. But he just comes back by the end of the two-parter anyway. So what's the fucking point? Like,
yeah.
But apparently, this is the episode where Seth MacFarlane appeared. He was like an engineer on Columbia.
Yeah. Yep. I noticed that right away. I was like, "Hey, Seth MacFarlane."
when I first watched it, I had no idea who the fuck he was. Like people were like, "Oh, the guy from Family Guy." It's like I never watched that show.
Yeah. No, I noticed he's one of the engineers on Columbia. Yeah. And this also kind of sets up for that character I don't like, who's the chief engineer for Little. He's like,
oh God.
And Bound, he's like most obnoxious in that episode. Like, yeah. But yeah, I think he first appears here.
All right, so I guess that's really all we got to say with worst episodes, because other episodes I would name would just be sort of mediocre. Like, I didn't really care much for that two-parter with the Demons Terror Prime. Like, I thought it was okay, but I didn't really... other people seem to love it. I don't know. I didn't really like it that much.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Didn't quite make my least favorite list, but I was just like, wasn't a huge fan of them.
All right. Well, speaking of episodes that didn't make our least favorite list, let's go ahead and talk about These Are the Voyages, which has made everyone else's least favorite list, apparently. It was once they did this top 10 worst episodes at a Star Trek convention once. It was like the Las Vegas big 50-year celebration or something. And this was in the top 5 worst of the entire franchise. Brennan Braga has apologized for this episode, saying that I can't believe this is what we did. This episode was, so terrible, and people always bring it up. Like constantly, I'm bombarded by references in every YouTube channel of how terrible this episode is and just how awful it is. And I'm like, that's fine. Like, like it's not a good episode. I would definitely say that. I gave it a 4 out of 10, so it's a negative rating. But I think there's way worse in Enterprise than that. Personally, and my opinion, I don't think it's the worst finale of Star Trek. For me, that's easily Voyager within game, but I know Alyssa doesn't agree, but that's very firmly my opinion. Like I think this episode's like a billion times better than in game personally, but that's again, that's just me. And I see what they were trying to do with this episode, because Rick Berman even talked about that, because he defended this episode, and that's something I actually agree. One thing I agree with him on is that his idea was, oh shit, we just found out the show's getting canceled. We were going to do a whole storyline building up to the birth of the Federation, but now we have to time jump there. And it's the easiest way to do that is just frame it through, other characters in the future watching it on the holodeck, which, I think it's an interesting concept, and I like how it ties to the greater Star Trek universe, that they're not just ending Enterprise, they're ending that era of Star Trek. And I actually kind of like that aspect of it. The story itself is not that interesting, and they kill off a main character on Submariners endlessly, and nobody gives a shit. And maybe they shouldn't end the show by having an episode that's about different characters from another show, but I don't think it's the most offensive thing ever.
Yeah, and I think I would even give it a higher rating than you. I might even go as far as to give it a 5.
Oh really? Oh
Um, yeah, I have a lot of forgiveness in my heart for this episode, because they were put in an impossible position. And I don't need Rick Berman to tell me this. I can just watch the episode. And I know they were put in an impossible position. It was so obvious that they were setting up for the ending of the Federation, or for the beginning of the Federation, sorry. And I just try to imagine what it would have been like if it had gone 7 seasons, if it got the 7 seasons that all the other shows of the era got. And it's crazy to think of it. It ended in 2007, because 2007 was a significant year in my life, because it's when I moved from where I was living in Massachusetts back to Oregon, where I still live. And then to me, that seems like a couple years ago, even though it was like 16
What
years ago.
what ended in 2007?
Enterprise would have, if it.
Oh, right.
Like, if it had gone the full 7 seasons that all the other shows got, it would have gone to 2007. This would have been a little more than halfway through the show. So they would have had much more time to build to the birth of the Federation. You wouldn't have had the time jump there, and you wouldn't have had to have, because as you said, part of the time jump logic was, well, we have the time jump, so let's make it a holodeck, because that's the best way we can think to do that, without just suddenly having a time jump. So if they had gone the full 7 seasons, and I know they say here that it was 10 years, but they would have just said it's 7 years. So like, they would have just had all that stuff happen 7 years out instead of 10. And I just kind of, in my head canon, just kind of imagining how good of a finale they would have had, that would have been the birth of the Federation, that would not have been rushed or jumped to all of a sudden, but they were just kind of hit with a cancellation. And so they decided they wanted to make an attempt to wrap up their story the way that they wanted to anyways. So they did that, and it obviously didn't turn out well, but it's not their fault, because they were canceled. So I just have a lot of forgiveness for this episode. And then just my overall experience of watching it from beginning to end. I always rate bad episodes by how much they're cringy to me, how difficult they are to sit through, how much I just want to, how many times I keep pressing pause because I just need to take a break, because I just can't sit through this straight through. And I just don't get it. Like, I just don't get why this episode is mentioned in the same breath of any bad episodes. You mentioned that it was like in the top 5 worst or whatever. Sean Ferrick on Trek Culture is always talking about how this is the worst episode in the Star Trek franchise. It's not even my top 100 worst episodes of the Star Trek franchise. There are just so. This is not even the worst, anywhere remotely close to the worst in Enterprise, which I don't think it would make my top 30 worst of Enterprise. Does it? Maybe my top 30. I don't know. Definitely not my top 20 worst. It's not in either of our top, 3 worst of season 4. Season 4 is not even one of the worst episodes in season 4 of Enterprise, let alone one of the worst in the franchise. Not even remotely close. Again, it's not a great episode. I do have issues with it. They shouldn't have focused on Riker, and it absolutely does not fit into Pegasus. There's no way
Oh yes, god damn.
during Pegasus. Troy and Riker have way too much knowledge of the intimate details of the Enterprise crew's lives. There's no way that they would know. So there are a ton of issues with it, but one of the worst in the franchise, not remotely close. I mean, it's fine. Like to me, 5 is a good rating because it's right down the middle for me. Like it's a very average rating.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of forgiveness because they were forced to do this.
Yeah, and for me, like, I don't even have to, like, I agree that there should be forgiveness because they're doing the best they could. But for me, I don't even, like, have to go down that road. I think because it's been a long road. But anyway, because I think, like, the episode itself to me, just bare bones, just as is not that offensive. Like, there's some good aspects to it. Like, I like how Riker's, finally is pretending to be Chef, which is a good play because we never got to see Chef, and he's like talking to each character individually, and we get their own sort of send off individually. And I do like how they put the whole. They felt like they put the whole show of Enterprise into the greater context of the Star Trek franchise, which I actually did really appreciate because it felt very disconnected to me, and it was actually nice to see to tie it together. Yeah, the whole plot with Shran's like daughter being kidnapped was kind of just they could have come up with something better, but I guess as you say, it's like last minute. This is the best they could do, thinking on their feet. I mean, there was not that interesting. And as a Trip hater, I kind of got a kick out of the fact that he died. No one gave a shit. but yeah. So
I disagree that no one gave a shit. I just watched it, and I mean, it obviously affected them, but Archer still had to make the speech. He's what he's going to do, not make the speech?
Well, all right. This is no. Well, the scene that I'm references of when everyone else is on, the Enterprise crew are sitting there waiting for the speech, and they're all talking like, "Oh, where are you going next? I'm going here. Oh, you're going to that ship." But no one's acknowledging or even feeling a little bit melancholy of the fact that their crewmate just got killed.
That is, yeah, that's true. I mean, I think more Archer and Paul definitely showed that they gave a shit about
yeah,
it.
it's true.
More on that. I didn't. That's just one scene, so I didn't even think about that. Yeah, and I didn't have a big problem with Trip dying because this is in the future, and on one aspect it seemed like kind of anticlimactic way for him to go, but at the same time, I know what they were trying to do, which is that Trip was putting their overall mission, Archer's overall mission, above himself, which is to start this coalition of planets, and that he was willing to sacrifice himself in order to so that Archer is able to complete that. And again, this is something that they would have done better if they decided to do it in a season 7 episode. Where I think if they wanted to do something like this, they would have had time to build up to it more, and it would have probably been a more. I mean, him dying on that stupid, pointless mission is a little anticlimactic. But I think it would have been better in a season 7. I just see what they were trying to do, which is for Trip to sacrifice himself for the greater good, even though it was kind of a pointless mission that they were on. So I see why it doesn't work, but I guess I'm just not super bothered by it because I see what their intention was. And again, I forgive them because they were forced to throw this together.
Well, and I've heard someone else who really hated this episode pointing out something that I do agree with, that the whole, like, those evil bad guy gangsters being able to get on the Enterprise and being able to, like, all of it stow away and able to, like, get in a situation where they're going to kill Trip was very contrived. Like, they wouldn't be able to do that. Like, that was plot contrivance. But it's not the worst offense. Like, I don't know. doesn't bother me that much.
Yeah, Brandon points out in the chat that Troy tells the truth died. So yeah, she did spoil that for us.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was annoying. Again, I don't think it's a great episode. I just don't see why you would put it in the same category as Bound, same category as United Sick Bay, same category. So many more, and go through all the bad episodes of Deep Space Nine, and yeah, it's not even close.
yeah. Most people are saying this episode's worse than Prophet and Lace.
Yeah, I just don't get it. I don't get it.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think it's a great episode. I just don't think it belongs anywhere close to the conversation of the worst.
Yeah, but it is a shame thinking how Enterprise getting canceled early. If it was able to go the whole 7 seasons, I think a lot of people, including myself, would look at the show as a whole more favorably.
I agree. Yeah.
And because it got good in season 3 and 4, and it probably would have remained at least this good going forward. And so it could have been like TNG, where they had 5 good seasons and 2 shitty seasons. But as it is, 2 shitty seasons, 2 good seasons. So it's like half and half.
Yeah, I think that's kind of my overall takeaway. Now, having finished the series, is one of the biggest shames in Star Trek that they were not able to give it more seasons. That they were not able to go on and have 7 seasons. Like, they could have had 3 more seasons, like Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Next Generation all got. So it's a shame. I think it's a real shame that they didn't get more seasons, and it's a shame that they were forced to cobble together this episode that everyone hates.
Yeah. But one thing I'm not really a big fan of is the idea of them doing what I call the Enterprise revival show. Like, apparently a lot of people.
Yeah, the Trek Culture did a whole big video about that. How they wanted, how there needs to be a Enterprise season 5. I think that ship has sailed. I don't think you do it now. I just wish they had gotten it back then.
Yeah. Or like a revival show that takes place 20 years later or something. I don't think we need that with Enterprise.
Yeah.
Deep Space Nine, on the other hand, maybe.
Deep Space Nine before I do.
Yeah.
Enterprise, but yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we can end our discussion here as good a place as any. Any final thoughts about these last 2 seasons of Enterprise before we sign off?
No, I think I kind of just wrapped it up pretty nicely. That's my takeaway. There should have been more seasons. But yeah.
All right, so I want to thank everyone for joining us. We had the usual suspects, but great to join us in the chat. Brandon Neilhouse, Norman Buchwald, and Maddie Jester. Thanks so much, and thank you for everyone else watching this in the archives and perhaps live and just didn't speak up in the chat. I believe we had a couple of other people earlier.
We did have a couple other people jump in earlier.
Yeah, Zyron the Gamer, and I believe there was a couple others. But anyway,
Since the Aquatics or something like that.
Oh yes. I
have to scroll back up to find them, but yeah.
But yeah, anyway, thank you all, and thanks everyone for who's watching this in the archives, and of course, thank you so much for Alyssa for coming aboard to talk about Enterprise.
Thanks for having me. This has been our tradition. We're now kind of all finished, unless we never actually did TNG or TOS, because when I did my rewatches for those, it was before we started doing this. But I don't think I want to go back now and do those at this point. We just did Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise. So unless we decided we wanted to do any of the modern shows, I think we're done. I think I was about to answer Norman's question, what next? I would like to go ahead and rewatch some of the modern Trek, but I think I want to start with Lower Decks. I'm not going to go in order because I've been really wanting. I haven't really watched any of the other. I've already done a rewatch of Voyager Discovery up through. I think I did it before season 4, so I think I rewatched the first 3 seasons. So I've already done that. So I'm going to start with Lower Decks because I've never gone back and watched all of them. I've watched a few of them that I really like. Again, I don't know that I'm going to do any kind of videos out of this, but I am going to at least watch those episodes, and then eventually probably end up doing either a top 25 of the whole modern Trek era, or I don't know if I will do each one individually because they're still in the air. Most of them, Picard will be done, but most of them will still be on the air. But that's next. I don't know if any videos are coming out of it, but that's next. As far as my own personal viewing, that's what I'm going to bench next is Lower Decks.
All right. Well, if you want to give a shout out to what you're doing on your channel currently and where people can find you.
So, well, real quick, Brandon asked if I'm still snowed in because I mentioned that in my video.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we had no school again today, but I think things are opening up again. I haven't actually driven yet. I could if I wanted to. I just haven't. I will probably drive tomorrow. So, yeah, still a lot of snow here. Biggest snowfall in Portland, and like I think it's the second biggest snowfall in a 24-hour period in history, in Portland history. So a lot of snow.
And I think when it was snowing there, it was like 70 degrees over here. It's crazy.
Anyways, what I'm doing next on my channel is I'm reviewing Star Trek Picard Season 3 every week. Try to get those up Thursday. What I normally do when I go to work is I get up early and I record it before I go to work, and then go to work and I leave it uploading, and it usually takes a few hours. So sometime in the afternoon, my time, it gets posted. So check that out. Every Thursday, I will be reviewing Picard, and then I will be posting my videos for my 10 least favorite and my 20 favorite episodes of Enterprise. Wrapping it all up, Enterprise is the last of the legacy shows that I need to do that for. I've done the other 4 shows, so Enterprise will make my collection complete. I will have least favorite and favorite of all 5 of the legacy. I don't really count TAS of all 5 of the legacy shows. So I'll look for that. I am going to try to get my least favorite video out a week from today. That is my goal. So next Friday, we'll be able to watch that. And then the following Friday, you'll be able to watch my 20 favorite Enterprise episodes. So stay tuned for that over on Alyssa Jean's Reviews.
Cool. And if you're finding me for the first time, my name is Mark. My channel is Enchantment of Eternity. I'm like Alyssa, also covering Picard Season 3, 1 episode at a time. And probably when the season's finished, we'll have to get together again and do another discussion on Picard. And also on my channel, I'm going through the original series, covering every single episode I have yet to cover. I'm currently in the midst of Season 2. Just got about to record my review for Bread and Circuses. What is Romans? That's so dumb. But anyway, this is a bit of a slog to get through the original series again, but whatever. Doing that. And yeah, that's basically what I'm doing on my channel for a while. Picard and the original series and a few other episodes, videos popping up here and there. So be sure to check me out for that. Thanks for checking us out tonight, and we'll see you next time.